Chapter 1459. Bam! Accompanied by a loud explosion, the ground suddenly burst open, raising a thick cloud of dust and gravel. Amidst a series of loud noises, it smashed into the ground. It was the damage caused by the three giant snakes crashing into the ground with their huge bodies. With the three giant snakes as the center, the powerful shockwaves spread in all directions. In the shockwaves, Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na retreated in three different directions from the thick sand and strong shockwaves, and the curse power in their bodies surged to the peak. The first person to move was still Erica. Steel Lion, I entrust you with the spirit of the words of Sai and Fury. Bathe in the holy blood of the last phase and manifest Holy Spear Longinus. While retreating, Erica raised the Lion King's heart in her hand and poured all the curse power in her body into it. Suddenly, the Lion King's heart, that had Golgotha's spirit, emitted a dazzling red light. It continuously changed shape within the red light, and finally, it turned into an extremely luxurious-looking spear. Hiya! Erica yelled. She gripped the spear tightly, pulled it over her shoulder, and threw it out with all her might. The glowing red spear immediately turned into a flash of light. Like a red meteor, it cut through the space and directly shot in the direction of the giant snake. At the same time, Liliana raised the Grandmaster's silver sword in her hand in midair. Jonathan's bow, the hero's weapon that is as fast as a vulture and as strong as a lion. Run and destroy your enemy. The magic sword named Silver Grandmaster Craftsman blossomed with a blue light, and in the end, it transformed into a longbow that flickered with blue light. Wielding her longbow, Liliana pulled the bowstring in the direction of the giant serpent. An arrow flashing with blue light appeared on the longbow. The tip of the arrow was aimed at the giant serpent that was charging towards the ground. Shoot through! In the next moment, Liliana loosened her grip on the bowstring. As a result, the arrow that was flashing with blue light shot out and turned into another blue meteor. It also cut through the space and shot towards the direction of the giant snake with a sharp piercing sound. Although Hui Na was one step slower than the knights who had a tacit understanding, she didn't want to be outdone. She raised the Susanu's godly power in her body to the peak, causing a storm to surge out from her body like a tornado and cover her whole body. My back to you is the king of the country, true withstands, unbreakable mountain oversteps by and shoot to see my Harano, imperial residence, and Musette, in the words that sounded like a ballad. The storm that covered Hui Na's entire body surged towards the tachi in his hand, spinning wildly on the blade of the tachi. Take this. Immediately, Hui Na held the tachi that carried a raging storm. Her entire body suddenly swept out, turning into the third meteor, rushing in the direction of the giant snake. Whoosh! Amidst the almost identical sounds of breaking through the air, three meteors streaked across the sky, drawing a nearly perfect arc in space. They flickered with brilliant light and landed with extreme precision on the tails of the three giant snakes. Poochie! In the tearing sound, the spear flashing with red light, the arrow blooming with blue light, and the tachi that carried the storm pierced through the tails of the three giant snakes and even directly came out of their bodies. At this moment, the three giant snakes stopped abruptly. The red light in their eyes dimmed little by little. Even their bodies began to petrify and turned into snake-shaped statues. Bang! In the explosion, the three petrified giant snakes exploded and turned into gravel all over the sky. They scattered on the ground and disappeared without a trace. In the storm, Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na retreated as if riding the wind and waves. After a while, they landed on the ground. The whole place suddenly became quiet. Seeing that Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na had all defeated their divine beast-level opponents safely, Yuli breathed a sigh of relief. Although Yuli didn't directly participate in the battle, he had made a great contribution. Just now, if Yuli hadn't successfully triggered Spirit Vision and seen the weaknesses of the three divine beasts, it would have been absolutely impossible for Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na to defeat the three divine beasts unscathed. Knowing this, even Athena couldn't help but cast her eyes in Yuli's direction. She glanced at Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na, and finally fixed her eyes on Noah. You seem to have a group of capable warriors and witches under your command. Really? Noah smiled. It's really an honor to be praised by Athena, who has trained many excellent warriors. Athena was known for her wisdom and beauty, but when it came to training warriors, she had great authority. In Greek mythology, there were legends that Athena had trained many famous warriors. Among them, even the hero Perseus, who killed the snake-haired demoness Medusa, was ordered by Athena to go to the island of the snake demons to slay dragons and snakes. Therefore, Athena's words were undoubtedly more convincing than anyone else's. Just like a certain anime that had been popular for a long time, didn't it also mention a group of fighters who were constantly fighting under Athena's command like unkillable cockroaches? There was no way to use the same move twice against them, and there was still a certain power called the little universe that burst out from them. That was enough to prove how strong Athena's divinity as the god of war was. But it was also because of this that the performance of the group of girls was just barely acceptable to Athena. It's a great achievement for humans to challenge the followers of the gods as mortals and win, Athena said to Noah with a relaxed smile. It's just that those girls have reached their limits, right? Upon hearing that, Noah couldn't help but turn his gaze in the direction of Erica, Liliana, and Huina. He saw that Erica, Liliana, and Huina were panting heavily, their slender shoulders heaving up and down. In order to deal with the divine beast-level opponents, Erica and Liliana's spell power was almost exhausted. They couldn't even maintain the combat magic of Golgotha's Spirit and Song of the Bow, causing the red and blue lights flickering on the Lion King's heart and Silver Master Craftsman to gradually disappear. Huina, who had used God's Descent, was a little unsteady. She stood with difficulty and was in a rather bad state. In fact, Noah had already foreseen this outcome. Therefore, Noah didn't show any troubled expression. He raised his head, looked at the high and mighty Athena, and spoke indifferently. Even so, I'm still the winner of this competition between my subordinates. Upon hearing Noah's words, Athena's eyes flickered, and the smile on her beautiful and charming face became a little cold. It's just a playful competition. You're my fated enemy. Don't tell me you think you can win against Athena, who is in charge of war. No matter how small the war is victory, and defeat is defeat, Noah said with a half-smile. Or could it be that the famous Athena is not even willing to accept this level of victory? The smile on Athena's face slowly disappeared, and she stared at Noah speechlessly. Noah didn't evade and looked straight back. The expression in his deep, dark eyes remained unchanged. Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Huina held their breaths. An oppressive atmosphere began to spread in the air. After a long time, Athena suddenly sighed and smiled sweetly. It's also my mistake to reveal the competition between my subordinates without any consideration. All right, I'll let you win this time. But you have to remember, you're my fated enemy. The victory between you and me has only just begun. Athena's voice slowly sounded. I'll prepare a suitable battlefield to fight you. When the time comes, it will be a head-on battle between you and me. After saying that, a gust of darkness emerged around Athena, and she disappeared in an instant. Noah looked in the direction where Athena disappeared and didn't speak for a long time. Chapter 1460. Come on, drink this. In the hotel of the Western Heaven Palace, Noah brought a bottle of red potion to Huina's mouth. Huina obediently drank the potion that was delivered to her mouth little by little. Looking at Huina, who was lying in her arms with a tired face, Yoli couldn't wait to ask Noah. Huina should be okay, right? It's okay, Noah responded casually as he fed the potion to Huina. Just like before, it's just a burden on the body caused by using invite God to descend. It's not a big deal. Drink this potion, and it won't take long for you to recover. Yoli's pretty face, which had been tense all the time, gradually relaxed. Beside her, Erica and Liliana, who were sitting and resting, were not injured, but they had consumed too much of their spell power. They explained the situation to Alice, who had been staying in the hotel. Even Athena has appeared? Alice sighed. Now, more and more godslayers and disobedient gods have gathered. For the people of this country, This should be an unprecedented disaster, right? Liliana said with a sad face. I guess the force called the History Compilation Committee should be having a headache now, right? Perhaps, as Athena said, an unprecedented upheaval is about to happen in this country, Erica said calmly. Multiple gods layers and disobedient gods have appeared in this country, and there are also unknown heroes sleeping in a corner of this island. Coupled with the god ancestor who has been eyeing this country covetously, the turmoil is inevitable. Upon hearing Erica's words, a sorrowful expression appeared on Yuli's face. Even the exhausted Hui Na let out a bitter laugh. She clearly felt that the future was going to be tough. Noah curled his lips and said so. Since the last king is sleeping in this island, then this turmoil will come sooner or later. Since it will come sooner or later, then it is already destined to be unavoidable. Why should we feel a headache now? Even Alice, Erica, and Liliana couldn't help but laugh bitterly when they heard this. However, Noah was right. Since the last king was sleeping in this island, it was only a matter of time before chaos broke out. Now it was just a moment. What I am more concerned about now is the movements of the other gods' layers. Noah turned his gaze to Alice. The chaos here should have spread throughout the entire magic world. The rest of the deicide should know about what happened here. Although I don't know if they already know about the existence and whereabouts of the last king, they shouldn't do anything unusual, right? For the demon kings who were born to be the source of chaos and the center of conflict, perhaps there was nothing more attractive to them than a hero who specialized in annihilating the demon kings. If the rest of the gods' layers knew about the existence and whereabouts of the last king, it would not be strange for them to all gather in this island country. When that time came, it would truly be the end of the world. All 7 of the god slayers were gathered in one place. That was a terrifying result that no one wanted to imagine. After all, no one would put 7 nuclear bombs that could explode at any time together, right? Who knew if one of them would suddenly go crazy and explode, igniting all the other nuclear bombs and causing a big explosion together? That scene could only be said to be too beautiful and no one dared to look at it. In this regard, Alice seemed to have a deep understanding of this and smiled elegantly. I have already contacted the Sage Parliament and asked them to report to me the current movements of the God Slayers all over the world. According to the report from the Sage Parliament, at present, the movements of the 7 God Slayers in the world were as follows. Marquis Warban was staying in his villa in Austria and did not do anything unusual. Bishop Luo Hao was discovered this morning to have returned to Mount Lu in China and did not come out. Madame Aisha's current whereabouts were unknown and there was no news at all. However, this situation had been maintained for many years, so there should be no abnormalities. John Plato Smith was still in Los Angeles, North America. He was leading the good faction's magicians to deal with the evil faction's magicians. If there were no accidents, he would not have the time to wander around other countries. The idiot Tony was taking Andre to East Asia. There seemed to be signs of the god of disobedience there, which made Tony very interested. So far, there were no signs of changes in the itinerary. As for Alexander, just as you think, that guy is currently hiding in this country. Alice reported the current movements of the God Slayers to Noah one by one. Then the rest is you. That should go without saying, right? As she said this, Alice looked at Noah with a somewhat strange expression. Even her pretty face was a little flushed. Seeing Alice in such a state, Liliana asked curiously, "Princess, what's wrong?" "No, it's nothing." Alice coughed deliberately and glanced at Noah. "I think it's better for you to not know for the time being, although you will find out sooner or later." While this sentence made Liliana puzzled, it also made Erica raise her eyebrows and cast an inquisitive look at Noah. Obviously, even though she didn't know what had happened, Erica still guessed that Noah must have done something. In this regard, Noah just glanced at Alice a little unnaturally. As a result, Alice's pretty face became even redder. The way she looked at Noah was as if she was looking at a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was very strange. Seeing Alice's reaction, and thinking that she now knew the movements of the various god slayers, Noah knew what was going on. Alice must have already heard the rumor that Noah had taken Luo Hao as his concubine. After all, His Excellency had already said that he would announce this matter to the world. If Alice was investigating the movements of the God-slayers, it was only a matter of course to know this news. This made Noah look away from Alice's strange and curious gaze with some resentment. He also deliberately coughed and turned to look at Yoli. Then, what did the History Compilation Committee say? Hearing Noah's words, Yoli was a little worried. Actually, the committee has brought some bad news. Including Noah, the attention of everyone present suddenly focused on Yoli. Isn't it good news? Noah spread his hands. Athena has already said that the last king is on the verge of recovery. There is no news worse than that. Wanriku, just say it directly. I understand. Yoli took a deep breath and became serious. According to the report of the committee, not long ago, a huge amount of curse power gathered on the beach near Tokyo, accompanied by the natural phenomenon of lightning and thunder. Not long after that, a huge amount of curse power also gathered on the beach not far from here, but it was accompanied by the sudden darkening of the sky. Lightning and night. Erica murmured. That's a phenomenon that can't be any more obvious. Athena should be on the other side of the night, right? Liliana said directly. That goddess is probably preparing for the battle with the king, just like when she made the declaration. Lancelot should be on the other side of the lightning. Alice nodded. As the war god of steel, Lancelot's characteristics are the power to control lightning and the ability to turn his body into mist to achieve immortality. Now, the signs of lightning have appeared, which should be Lancelot's appearance. In other words, the war god is no longer the shadow of God, but has appeared as the god of disobedience. Huina asked in surprise. Why did he suddenly appear? I'm afraid that the god has already noticed that the last king is on this island and is ready to go all out. Noah frowned. However, Athena and Lancelot appearing at the same time is a little troublesome. Now it's up to you. Erica looked at Noah. Which side do you want to go to? Noah was silent. This was truly a difficult choice to make. Chapter 1461. Crash. The sound of the waves reverberated in the silent night, filling the air with a tranquil atmosphere, calming the hearts of the people. The goddess, who was famous for her beauty, was currently standing on the beach where waves were constantly crashing. She was looking at the endless ocean, her robes fluttering in the wind, adding a sense of beauty to the tranquil atmosphere. If this was just an ordinary night, such a scene would definitely make anyone who saw it fall into a trance. Unfortunately, this was not an ordinary night. If someone was here, they would definitely notice it. Now, it was not even noon yet, let alone night. However, even though it was not even noon yet, the sky here was as dark as night. There was not even a full moon or stars. All the light had disappeared without a trace in this area, leaving not a single trace. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was an environment where one could not even see one's fingers. Anyone who could move normally in such an environment would definitely not be an ordinary person. Under such circumstances, the goddess named Athena looked at the scenery of the ocean and murmured, "Sure enough, the battlefield should be on the sea." In fact, the sea god Poseidon was Athena's archenemy. At least, in Greek legends, the relationship between Athena and Poseidon could only be described as enemies. In Greek mythology, Poseidon, the sea god who ruled the sea, was quite aggressive and ambitious. He always wanted to seize the throne of Zeus, the king of the gods. However, he was discovered by Zeus and was banished to the ground. However, Poseidon's divinity had an aggressive side, which made him unable to rest in peace and often fought with the gods. For this reason, Athena and Poseidon also fought in the myths and formed a grudge. However, Athena, who regarded Poseidon as an enemy, did not hate the sea ruled by the sea god because of this. This was because the sea and the earth were the source of life. As the goddess of life and death, Athena could not hate the sea. What Athena really hated was the sun. The sun could illuminate the sky that was controlled by Zeus, who had always been bullying Metis, who was equivalent to Athena's avatar. Zeus had also reduced Athena to his own daughter and expelled the darkness, driving out the night of Athena, the goddess of darkness, causing the sky to fall into the hands of Zeus. If there was no sun, the sky would be Athena's domain. Athena's darkness would occupy the entire sky, and every corner of the sky would be under her control. However, it was because of the sun that Athena's darkness was unable to take over the sky, preventing the night from descending. As a result, the sky had always been Zeus' domain. That was why the queen of the night, Athena, was truly unhappy with the existence of the sun that could expel the darkness. Of course, Athena's pride would not allow her to admit that the reason why the goddess hated the sun was because the sun was the nemesis of the goddess of earth. As the god of death who controls hell, as the goddess of darkness who brings the night, as well as the goddess of earth who is the source of life, no matter which attribute it is, the sun firmly restrains Athena. After all, since ancient times, not only was light able to expel darkness, but it was also believed to be able to expel ghosts and undead, preventing contact with hell. On the other hand, the earth could only thrive and obtain life under the sun's illumination. As the queen of hell, darkness, and earth, Athena's attributes were completely restrained by the sun. This was also one of the reasons why Athena hated the sun. Every time Athena appeared, it would be accompanied by the arrival of night. This was an important reason. Even if Athena regained her identity as the queen of the Trinity, she would not want to move around under the sun, so, I have to choose the sea. With this thought in mind, Athena's eyes that gazed at the sea emitted an evil glint. Her eyes were like an owl's, but also like a snake's. The common point was that they were extremely cold. Being stared at by these eyes would definitely bring death to humans in an instant. Under the gaze of such a pair of sinister eyes, the surging waves in front of Athena came to a halt as though time had come to a halt. Rumble! The sea suddenly trembled for no reason, and as if there was a volcanic eruption at the bottom of the sea, it suddenly surged violently. Crash! Accompanied by a loud sound of water, an island separated from the surface of the water and slowly rose up. It was a stone island. Whether it was the ground, the trees, or the grass, they were all made of stone. Such a stone island separated from the surface of the water and rose from the bottom of the sea. Not long after, it floated above the surface of the sea and stopped trembling as if it had been there from the beginning. When the stone island completely floated above the surface of the water, Athena's evil eyes dimmed little by little, but an extremely beautiful smile appeared on her face. Yes, this is it. Only this is suitable to be the battlefield of the goddess of earth. Although Athena's attributes were more complicated in mythology, after regaining her identity as the queen of the Trinity, Athena's essence was only left with one: snake. The snake goddess who had been banished by the heroes of the Steel Empire and attacked by them. Since this is the battlefield of fate, only this can best represent Athena's snake. Looking at the stone island that she created with her authority and divine power, Athena let out an innocent and joyful laugh like an ordinary girl. Upon closer inspection, one could see that there were many statues on the stone island. Each of them was made of stone, and their faces were filled with panic, despair, wailing, and fear. They were lifelike human statues that made people feel a chill in their hearts. Gazing at these creepy statues, the smile on Athena's beautiful face became wider and wider. Although this is just a scene created by my authority, and not those stupid warriors that once challenged my clone, it is enough to serve as a foil. Whether it was the island that originally only existed in mythology, or the statues that once challenged the Medusa, but were turned into stone, they were just foils. Athena only cared about the man that had a deep relationship with her. It was precisely because of this that Athena enjoyed all of this from the bottom of her heart. She enjoyed the whole process of preparing to meet that man again and determine the winner on the battlefield. For Athena, this was something to be intoxicated with. "My fated enemy, hurry up and come to me," Athena murmured expectantly. "I can't wait any longer." While murmuring the words of a young girl who missed her sweetheart, the smile on Athena's face suddenly disappeared without any reason. Soon after, Athena suddenly opened her mouth in anger. "Leave here, maid. This is a place that I prepared for that person. It is not a place that you can set foot in." Along with Athena's angry shout, the sand on the beach suddenly rolled up and turned into a giant snake. It opened its bloody mouth and pounced towards the grass in the distance. Bang! In the midst of the explosion, the giant snake that used its huge head to hit the ground shook the violent impact and dust, causing the ground to tremble and crack. Then, in the impact and dust, a figure of light rushed out and burst into the distance, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Seeing this, Athena snorted, turned her head, and continued to look at the creepy rocky island. As if thinking of that man again, she revealed a charming smile. At the same time, the figure of light that escaped from Athena's attack swept into the distant horizon. After a long time, it stopped and revealed its full appearance. Impressively, it was Guinevere. Guinevere's face was a little pale, cold sweat dripping down, and he muttered to himself with some lingering fear. I didn't expect Athena to be so obsessed with the relationship with that king. She didn't even give me a chance to speak before attacking. Originally, Guinevere wanted to try to cooperate with Athena to deal with Noah. But now it seemed that Athena would not agree to let anyone interfere with her relationship with Noah. There's no other way, I can only give up on Athena's side. Guinevere was extremely unwilling to turn into a stream of light and rushed in another direction. Chapter 1462. An island has appeared by the sea? In the hotel, Noah, who was still worrying about where to go, immediately received the shocking news. An island? Huina asked curiously. Why would an island suddenly appear? I don't know. Mr. Gansu just called and told me about it. He asked me to report it to the king. Yoli shook his head. If we can get closer, we might be able to get more information. But Athena seems to be there, and the people of the History Compilation Committee don't dare to get too close. In other words, it should be Athena's doing, right? Liliana said with a stern expression. To be able to create an island out of thin air, no other power in the world can do such a miracle except for the power of the god of disobedience and the god of deicide. But why would Athena create an island? Huina didn't understand. What's the point of doing that? I'm afraid that's the battlefield that Athena mentioned, right? Erica said. In order to face the opponent that she acknowledged, in order to fight against the man of her destiny, Athena prepared the stage. It was a battlefield that she created with the consciousness to perform the final glory of her life, whether it was for the king or for Athena. But since Athena didn't hesitate to create an island, it shouldn't be an ordinary island, right? Alice pondered for a moment and asked Noah tentatively. Do you need me to use my spirit body avatar to take a look? No, it's better not to do that. Noah rejected Alice's proposal. To Athena, humans are like weeds. They are of no importance. If you barge into Athena's territory, you might be attacked. She is the god of the underworld who controls death. Even if you use your spirit body avatar, she might have a way to hurt you. That would be too dangerous, Yoli hurriedly advised. Miss Alice, it's better not to do that. You're right, Alice said helplessly. Although I'm a little curious and concerned about the island, it's better not to approach it casually since it's dangerous. At least, it's best not to approach it without the company of a god-slayer who can fight the goddess. But at least we understand one thing, Erica declared. That is, Athena is indeed very interested in having a showdown with our king. Everyone nodded in agreement. The gods of disobedience were originally a group of transcendental existences that had been devoured by madness. They were only normal when they were in the realm of the undead, which was the world of myths and legends. If they appeared on the ground, they would immediately fall into a certain obsession, and for that, they would not hesitate to disturb the world and slaughter living beings. For Athena, Noah was her obsession to appear in the world. If she didn't end things with Noah, the goddess would probably chase after Noah until the end of the world, even if the world fell apart and the universe was destroyed. In fact, at the end of the day, Noah and Athena didn't have much contact with each other. It was only because of a chance encounter that they became friends. If Noah hadn't met Athena, he wouldn't have found the Stone of Gorgon by tracking Athena's whereabouts. If Noah hadn't found the Stone of Gorgon, he wouldn't have been targeted by Athena. If Noah hadn't been targeted by Athena back then, she wouldn't have schemed to lure Warban, Luo Hao, and Tony to him. If Noah hadn't defeated the three godslayers because Warban, Luohao, and Tony were lured by Athena, Athena wouldn't have looked at Noah in a new light and started to pay attention to Noah. After that, Noah and Athena formed an alliance together in Naples to fight Perseus. After a series of disputes, they formed a deeper relationship and made an agreement. Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but think of the agreement he made with Athena in Naples. At that time, Noah and Athena made an agreement that there would be a real winner one day. At that time, if Noah won, then Athena would be able to stay by Noah's side forever as a guardian and fight with Noah. And if Noah lost, then Noah would be at Athena's disposal. In fact, the reason why he made such an agreement was entirely because of a whim. As for Athena, Noah felt that it was inconceivable. Noah had always been the kind of person who would be good to others if others were good to him. If others were to find fault with him, then he would return the favor tenfold or even 100-fold. Undoubtedly, the goddess had caused a lot of trouble for Noah in order to retrieve the stone of Gorgon, but Noah didn't dislike Athena at all. Instead, as he got along with Athena, he was gradually attracted by the goddess' pride and charm. That feeling was not love, but it was a kind of specious thing. Presumably, Athena must have felt the same way, which was why she was so obsessed with Noah. If this kind of feeling had to be described with something, then it could only be described by Athena. Fate. This was the fate between Noah and Athena. To put it bluntly, it was just a kind of ill-fated relationship. However, whether it was Noah or Athena, because of this ill-fated relationship, they began to pursue each other. Athena said, no matter what, she was the only one who could bring death to Noah. Noah had said the same thing. In any case, the person who could defeat Athena must be him. From then on, the fate between Noah and Athena had reached a deep-rooted state and could not be forcibly broken. Therefore, when she sensed that the last king was likely to wake up at any time to conquer the demon king and the god slayer, Athena was eager to recapture the stone of Gorgon, restore the power of the Trinity, and end things with Noah. However, when he saw Athena again, Noah was not as eager to fight as Athena. Otherwise, Noah wouldn't have chosen to watch from the sidelines during the confrontation with Athena and sent Erica and the other girls to accept Athena's challenge. Then he used the victory of a subordinates competition as an excuse to make the prideful Athena leave as a loser. Because Noah believed that if she lost a duel, with Athena's self-esteem, she would never be like a stray dog, unwilling to accept defeat and continue to challenge. The reason why he did this was because Noah subconsciously did not want to fight to the death with Athena. That was the reason. And it turned out that Noah's idea was correct. Athena did not continue to fight on the spot, but chose to retreat. However, Athena immediately began to prepare for the battlefield again, and even summoned an entire island. One could imagine how much Athena looked forward to the battle with Noah. Under such circumstances, could Noah still avoid the battle? If he avoided the battle, how disappointed would the goddess, who was known for her beauty, be? At that moment, Noah closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Huina, as well as Alice, all the girls present cast their eyes on Noah, waiting for Noah's decision. In the end, would Noah choose to fight Athena? Or fight Lancelot? The decision was made at this moment. After a while, Noah suddenly opened his eyes and made such a declaration. After sunset we will fight Athena. Hearing this, Erica and Liliana smiled at the same time, knelt on one knee, and performed the most solemn knight salute. Yes, sir. Yoli and Huina looked at each other, nodded, and turned to Noah. King, please let us join the battle. Noah nodded, then turned to Alice. Meeting Noah's gaze, Alice opened her mouth, and just as she was about to say something, the phone in her arms rang. Alice was slightly taken aback. She smiled apologetically at Noah, picked up the phone, and looked at the screen. At the next moment, Alice's eyes widened, and she exclaimed in shock. Alexander was severely injured by Lancelot and escaped. This sentence made Noah's eyes flicker. Chapter 1463. Above the boundless sky, a bolt of lightning abruptly flew across the clear sky. It cut through the air and cut open the atmosphere. With a sharp sound, it rushed forward. With a speed comparable to that of lightning, Yarek used the authority of lightning spark to enter the world of seraphic speed. His body had also turned into lightning. He desperately whipped his body, squeezing out the remaining curse power and physical strength in his body. He gritted his teeth and didn't waste a single second of time flying. For the current Yarek, time was definitely the most precious thing. Because with Yarek's speed, he only needed a short second to cross a city and reach the other side of the sky. In other words, time meant distance. With just one more second, Yarek could increase the distance and avoid being chased by the enemy. Although Yarek had used the authority of seraphic speed, and it was reasonable to say that there were no more than 3 people in this world who could catch up to him. However, the enemy didn't belong to this category. He was an incarnation of the realm of the gods and couldn't be judged by common sense. Therefore, Yarek could only whip his body desperately to escape. He didn't know how long this situation lasted. Yarek only knew that when the curse power in his body that was thousands of times more powerful than the average magician's was finally exhausted, he finally couldn't hold on any longer. The speed of the lightning that was flashing in the sky slowed down bit by bit. Like a kite with a broken string, it fell down to the ground. Finally, as if a bolt of lightning had fallen from the sky, the lightning suddenly landed on the bank of a river. Bang! The lightning from the sky exploded the ground, causing bricks and gravel to fly up and sand to fill the air. After the sand and dust dissipated, Yarek was lying in the hole that had been blown up by the lightning, gasping for breath. Cough! With a cough, Yarek spat out a mouthful of blood. Not only that, but blood continuously flowed out from Yarek's abdomen and instantly dyed the ground red. Taking a closer look, there was a bloody hole in Yarek's abdomen. It even broke open Yarek's back. In other words, there was a hole in Yarek's abdomen that allowed one to see the scene behind him. The sharp pain seemed to come from his bone marrow, tormenting Yarek's remaining consciousness. The damage to his body was very serious. The pain in his abdomen was very intense. His heart was beating like a drum. It felt like every corner of his body was breaking apart. It was unbearable. There was no doubt that Yarek had received a fatal injury that could take his life in an instant. An ordinary person, even a magician with high attainments in magic, would most likely die from such a serious injury. To be able to survive such a severe injury, it was definitely not a human. Only a godly ancestor like Guinevere and the princess could survive such a serious injury. Only a godly ancestor like Guinevere and the princess could survive such a serious injury. However, Yarek was a demon king that surpassed even the aforementioned existences. Although his body was that of a human, his vitality could be considered monstrous. That was what a true god slayer was. This was also the reason why Noah, who had a large chunk of his abdomen dug out by the 3-headed dragon, was able to continue living like that. The so-called god slayers were such a group of unnatural existences. That was why they could even kill gods. That was why they were feared by humans. Perhaps, only the legendary hero who specialized in annihilating the demon kings, the last king, would be able to deal with these foul existences. However, if this continues, no matter how tenacious my vitality is, I will still die from excessive blood loss. Now, Yarek was facing such a situation. Naturally, he himself understood this the best. If he had the power of resurrection like Noah and Warban, Yarek might still be able to survive. If he had the power of immortality like Tony, who could enter a state of suspended animation, Yarek would be able to survive until someone came to his rescue. Unfortunately, Yarek did not have that kind of power. If there was still curse power in his body, he could still use the power of lightning spark to turn into lightning and abandon his human body to avoid death from excessive blood loss. This was one of the reasons why Yarek was able to survive until now. However, now, the curse power in Yarek's body had been completely exhausted from the previous battle and escape. In short, Yarek could only resign himself to fate. Although he said that, Yarek endured the severe pain in his body and laughed self-deprecatingly. Although it's up to fate in the end, I will still be saved, right? After all, Yarek was very clear. The woman who had always been against him would definitely have placed some spies around him. Therefore, that woman would definitely be the first to know about his condition and rush over. At that time, Yarek would naturally be saved. Although, if that woman saved me, I would rather die. As soon as he said this, an elegant and light voice sounded in front of Yarek. That's great, Alexander. You've finally understood how I felt in the past. Hearing this voice, Yarek breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he clicked his tongue in his heart and raised his head with difficulty to look forward. In front of Yarek, the space suddenly trembled. A gush of darkness surged out of nowhere and condensed into the shape of a door. Then, from the door that seemed to be formed by a pitch-black swamp, two figures slowly walked out and came to Yarek, who was lying in a pool of blood. Hello, Alexander. Alice seemed to be friendly as she greeted him. I didn't expect that I would be able to see you in such a miserable state in my life. As expected, your good behavior is blessed by the heavens. I know that once you appear in front of me, you won't say anything nice, but I still feel very unhappy. Yarek tried his best to keep his voice from trembling and tried to be as calm and normal as usual. He then turned his gaze to the other person. It's just that I'm really surprised that you're here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not interested in admiring other people's miserable state, whether it's my own people or my enemies, Noah said faintly. I just want to know how difficult it is to deal with Lancelot in the state of the god of disobedience. Is that why you're here? Yarek laughed self-deprecatingly. Well, at least that's a convincing reason, unlike the woman beside you, whose mind is twisted. I don't want you to say that, Your Highness the Black Prince with a twisted mind, Alice said nonchalantly as if she was really admiring Yarek's miserable state. Anyway, the reason why you're so badly injured must be that you found out that Lancelot was accumulating power and was preparing to descend as the god of disobedience. In order to prevent the enemy from becoming too powerful, you thought that you had to take action at that time and take advantage of the opportunity to kill Lancelot. In the end, you were defeated by Lancelot, right? Yarek was suddenly speechless. It seems that I was right, Alice said cheerfully. But it's also true. Black Prince Yarek is a self-proclaimed god-slayer as a wise man and counselor. In order to show his rationality and to prove that he's different from others of his kind who only know how to fight, he must think that it's a stupid thing to let the enemy increase his power. But that's because of your twisted mind. Tisse? Yarek smacked his lips. What makes you say that? Is it wrong to think this way? Of course it's right to think this way. The problem is what you did next, Alice said directly. Anyway, although you calculated the pros and cons clearly, because of your pride, you would never do something like a sneak attack. You must have provoked Lord Guinevere and Lancelot in front of them and started a fight, right? Yarek's mouth twitched. Obviously, Alice had hit the nail on the head again. Chapter 1464. In fact, what happened was not much different from what Alice had said. Lancelot appeared as the god of disobedience, and Yarek was almost immediately aware of it. As soon as he noticed Lancelot's abnormality, Yarek immediately rushed in his direction without any hesitation, not caring about Athena's abnormality. That was to be expected. Compared to Athena, Lancelot was undoubtedly the target that Yarek wanted to get rid of. Because of Guinevere, Yarek and Lancelot had fought many times over the years and had already formed a lot of grudges. Naturally, with Yarek's personality, it was impossible for him to watch Lancelot's strength increase. Originally, Lancelot was only a shadow of God protecting Guinevere. If Lancelot got rid of his identity as a guardian and no longer appeared as a shadow of God, but as the god of disobedience, his strength would definitely increase by several times, and there would no longer be a problem with the duration of his appearance. In that case, Lancelot would undoubtedly become a very troublesome opponent for Yarek. There was no other reason other than the fact that the two were not compatible. As the most original god of War of Steel, Lancelot's martial arts were not inferior to Luo House. It was precisely because of this that Lancelot naturally mastered the mind's eye skill that could break through lightning speed. Once, in Nabali, Lancelot used the mind's eye skill to break through Yarek's lightning speed and almost gave Yarek a fatal blow. At that time, Lancelot was still in the form of a shadow of God and could only appear for a short period of time. Moreover, his strength was not as high as those of the highest level gods and had a lot of limitations. If Lancelot appeared as the god of disobedience, it was only natural that his strength would increase sharply, and even the duration of his appearance would be cancelled. For Yarek, who used lightning speed as his main fighting method, it was really too disadvantageous. For this reason, Yarek naturally had to prevent Lancelot from appearing before he obtained all the strength of the god of disobedience state. Unfortunately, Lancelot's appearance had been going on for some time, and his strength had accumulated a lot. Thus, Yarek, who had brazenly entered Lancelot's territory, was met with a deadly counterattack from the pure-blooded steel hero. He was heavily injured and could only rely on his speed to escape. It was just as Alice had said. Undoubtedly, Yarek had calculated the pros and cons, but because of his own aesthetics, he disdained to use a sneak attack. In the end, under the situation where his seraphic speed authority was restrained, he was naturally counterattacked by Lancelot, whose strength had suddenly increased and almost died. It was impossible for Yarek not to see through this in advance. It was impossible for Yarek, who had already fought Lancelot many times, not to understand that his greatest battle technique had been countered by his opponent. However, Yarek didn't choose to launch a sneak attack. Instead, he chose to challenge them head-on. Perhaps you miscalculated Lancelot's strength, but more importantly, you knew what the outcome would be, yet you still chose to fight based on your own aesthetics. That's why you ended up like this, isn't it? It was as if Alice had witnessed the entire battle with her own eyes. She spoke with fervor and assurance. Undoubtedly, you are smart, but you insist on some stupid principles in some unnecessary places. That is proof of your twisted mind, Alexander. You really are a god-slayer. Don't talk to me as if you know me very well. I'm not that close to you. Yarek couldn't help but feel a little agitated because his sore spot had been poked. In the end, he forgot that he still had a fatal injury, which caused his chest to tighten, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Alice laughed. You can still speak so agitatedly even after suffering such a serious injury. It seems that you are fine. Indeed, you are worthy of being called the Demon King. Yarek could only close his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. It seemed that being reduced to such a miserable state in front of his enemy really made Yarek feel extremely aggrieved. On the other hand, Alice was very happy. I finally returned the favor here, Alexander. After this time, I don't owe you anything. Although Alice and Yarek were enemies, they didn't have a grudge against each other. Instead, it was because of their positions that were hostile to other parties that led to this situation. In other words, they were the so-called political enemies. And since it was due to political hostility, it would never be mixed with personal feelings. For example, in the situation of dealing with Guinevere, Alice and Yarek had the same position and interests, so the two had cooperated many times. Because of this, Alice had been saved by Yarek once in the past. At that time, Alice's feelings were probably similar to Yarek's now. Seeing Alice continue to mock Yarek with a happy face, Noah couldn't help but shake his head. He stepped forward, took out a bottle of potion from his arms, opened the bottle, and poured it directly into Yarek's penetrated abdomen. Clang! The potion that was poured into Yarek's penetrated back immediately evaporated into a mist. It covered Yarek's body like a soft fluorescent light, emitting light. Under the illumination of the light, the wounds on Yarek's body that directly penetrated the front and back of his body began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yarek only felt that the severe pain in his abdomen began to disappear little by little, and the lack of physical strength in his body began to recover little by little, which surprised him a little. After Noah poured the whole bottle of potion on Yarek's wound, the fatal wound on Yarek's abdomen had disappeared without a trace. The effect was more powerful than any magic or curse in this world. This made Alice cast her shining eyes on the potion bottle in Noah's hand. What a powerful elixir! I'm afraid that even the highest level which can't make such a powerful elixir. Not directly drinking it, but sprinkling it on the body, can it heal the Godslayer's wound? Yarek sat up from the pool of blood and stroked his unscathed abdomen. He also stared at the potion bottle in Noah's hand. That is indeed a very amazing thing. It was important to know that the Godslayer's body was immune to all magic and curses. If it was directly drunk, it would still have an effect on the Godslayer. But sprinkling it on the Godslayer's body, even the most effective elixir wouldn't work, right? Moreover, the effect was exceptionally amazing. Don't look at me like that. It's not as magical as you think. Noah casually threw away the potion bottle in his hand and said to Yarek, "Your wound directly penetrated from the outside to the inside, and then from the inside to the outside. When the potion was sprinkled, it was equivalent to sprinkling it directly into your body. That's why it was effective. Of course, it was only effective to the extent of being effective. Even if it was effective, being able to heal such a serious injury in such a short time was enough to prove the magic of the potion. However, that was to be expected. That potion bottle, even in Yggdrasil, was the highest level consumable item. Once used, no matter how much HP a character had, it would instantly restore them to full HP. Yarek, who slowly got up from the ground, silently looked at Noah. After a while he spoke. "You must have a reason for saving me, right?" Yarek didn't use a questioning tone. Instead, he used a very certain tone. In response, Noah nodded and said bluntly, "I have a target that I must fight." Hearing this, Yarek narrowed his eyes and said a name. "Athena?" "That's right." Noah nodded. "But I don't want to be disturbed in the process of fighting Athena." "I see. Is that your goal?" Yarek shrugged. "You want me to restrain Lancelot, right?" Noah did not comment, which made Yarek laugh. "Very well. This time, our interests are aligned. I'll go with your wishes." Noah and Alice exchanged glances with each other and smiled faintly. Chapter 1465. After that, Noah shared some information with Yarek and learned about Lancelot's current situation. At present, Lancelot had appeared in the state of the god of disobedience, but his power had not increased to the extent that he should have. After years of guarding Guinevere, Lancelot had already adapted to the state of the shadow of God. Now that he had suddenly turned into the body of disobedience, his power could not be increased to the peak at once. It needed to be accumulated bit by bit. According to Yarek, Lancelot had now accumulated a considerable amount of power. Yarek had miscalculated Lancelot's current power, which was why he was seriously injured. If this continued, it would not take long for Lancelot's power to recover to the peak of the state of the god of disobedience, and he would become a powerful enemy no weaker than the great sage. For this reason, Yarek said that he had to keep an eye on Lancelot and see if he could find an opportunity to attack him. Noah naturally had no objections, but he gave Yarek a request. "No matter what, I will fight with Athena tonight." Noah said to Yarek, "At that time, whether you can find an opportunity to attack Lancelot or not, if Lancelot intends to intervene in the battle between me and Athena, you must stop him." "Tonight?" Yarek looked at Noah meaningfully and curled his lips into a smile. "You really are a god slayer." This remark came out of nowhere. However, anyone who understood the reason behind it would understand why Yarek said this. Noah naturally understood why Yarek said this, and he retorted, not to be outdone. "Do you have the right to say this to me?" Yarek wanted to refute Noah's words, but when he glanced at Alice's eager expression, he immediately shut his mouth. Presumably, if Yarek refuted, Alice would use Yarek's serious injury as an excuse to fight back on behalf of Noah. Understanding this point, although Yarek was very unhappy, he didn't want to ask for a snub, so he immediately said to Noah, "I can keep an eye on Lancelot, but I can't guarantee that the short-sighted god ancestor won't have other ideas. Since Guinevere didn't hesitate to let Lancelot show up, it means that the last king Guinevere has been looking for is very likely to be nearby. That guy will definitely do something. You decide what to do." True enough. Just as Alice had said, Yarek finally noticed the last king. Moreover, Yarek had given such an explanation. The hero who is destined to annihilate the demon king. Now that there are already 7 god-slayers in the world, is it a certainty that he will awaken again? Or is it something that can be stopped? The only people who will bear witness to this outcome will probably be you and me. If it can be stopped, then I don't mind giving him a hand. But if it is inevitable, then presumably, at the same time, the person who will bear witness to this outcome and become the first sacrifice under the hero's sword is also likely to appear between you and me. After leaving these words, Yarek released the power of speed, turned into a flash of lightning, and disappeared on the other side of the sky. After that, Alice said that when she returned to the hotel, she would use her avatar to keep an eye on Yarek. According to what the princess said, she seemed to think that Yarek would do something. Indeed, under the circumstances of having a common enemy and common interests, the Black Prince Yarek is a trustworthy partner. But that psychologically twisted guy also has a side that will not hesitate to give up if he thinks that the plan will fail. He is simply too evil. If we don't keep an eye on him, who knows if he will suddenly retreat at the critical moment and leave the mess for us to clean up. In view of this, Alice loudly advocated that they must keep an eye on the Black Prince Yarek. Indeed, there was a possibility that Yarek would suddenly put his own safety first and escape like a cicada. Otherwise, after being severely injured by Lancelot, the Black Prince would not have escaped so quickly. Once he saw that the situation was unfavorable, this guy would definitely suddenly withdraw. To put it nicely, it would be a wise choice. To put it bluntly, it would be adding insult to injury. In short, Alice believed that they still needed to keep an eye on Yarek. Although, Noah thought that rather than saying that Alice intended to spy on Yarek, it was better to say that she intended to keep mentioning in Yarek's ear that he saved her, so as to give this guy a blow and amuse him. But it had to be said that Alice's suggestion was also correct. Therefore, Noah did not object. Neither Noah nor Alice noticed. Unknowingly, the two acted together as if it was a matter of course, without any consideration at all. Just like this, Noah and Alice passed through the portal and returned to the hotel. And as soon as they returned to the hotel, Noah discovered it. Erica and Liliana, who were chatting with Yoli and Huina, immediately looked at Noah with a strange expression when they saw him return. Seeing this, for some reason, Noah suddenly had an ominous feeling in his heart. Then Erica and Liliana both spoke. Although I know that you are more unreasonable than the other godslayers, I didn't expect you to be this unreasonable. Erica used sarcastic words to mock Noah. However, as your follower, let me congratulate you a little. Our king, you have accomplished another feat that the other godslayers could not. I thought you must be much more rational than the other godslayers, but sure enough, you are also an unreasonable king. Liliana, on the other hand, stared at Noah with eyes that seemed to be filled with anger and sadness, but more than that, it was as if she had been betrayed. I was wrong about you, Noah Doria. Seeing that both Erica and Liliana were angry, the corner of Noah's eyes twitched. He could not help but look at Yoli and Huina. Sensing Noah's gaze, Huina did not know why, but she turned her head away with some embarrassment. As for Yoli, her pretty face turned red as she stammered. Actually, Mr. Gandu just called me and said that someone left a message for the king and sent it to my phone. After saying that, Yoli operated the phone and played the language. The next moment, a rather familiar voice sounded from Yoli's phone. Grandmaster, disciple Lu Yinghua has already announced the news of Grandmaster taking my master as a concubine to the world under master's orders. I believe that Grandmaster's name will spread all over the world in a few days to strengthen Grandmaster's reputation. Noah's face froze. Also, Disciple heard that there seems to be another troublesome opponent on Grandmaster's side, so I reported this to Master. Lu Yinghua's voice was still playing. Master asked Disciple to tell Grandmaster that Luo Tsuelian is now a married woman. Although she can't show her face in public, she still has the responsibility of assisting her husband and teaching her children. She should be by her husband's side when he is in trouble. However, Luo Tsuelian's husband is an unparalleled king. He can overcome these small tribulations with his unparalleled strength. There is no need for a woman to tell him what to do. Therefore, Master will continue to live deep in Mount Lu and wait for Grandmaster's triumphant return. After saying that, Luinghua's voice disappeared from Yoli's phone. The whole place fell into a dead silence. Alice couldn't help but mutter. Although I knew that this news couldn't be hidden sooner or later, I didn't expect it to be so soon. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched uncontrollably. He had no idea what to say. Looking at Noah, Liliana still looked as if she had been betrayed. Erica glanced at Noah and said with a faint smile. Even sect leader Luo Hao can be taken as a concubine, as expected of our king. Therefore, as your knight, I hope you can explain the process to us clearly. You must let us understand how powerful our king is. At this moment, Noah only felt that, perhaps, this would be an even more difficult calamity to overcome than the duel with Athena. Who knows? Chapter 1466. No matter how many twists and turns there were, time would not stop just because of that. Under all kinds of circumstances, the sky gradually darkened. Noah walked out of the hotel alone and stood in front of the door. He looked up at the starry sky and fell into silence. Lancelot was probably still accumulating power, right? Yarek, on the other hand, was definitely not going to act rashly. He was hiding in the dark and keeping an eye on the original hero of Steel. Alice was lying in a room in the hotel at this moment. She had used a spirit clone and sent it to keep an eye on Yarek. Of the remaining people, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui were preparing to set off. They were adjusting themselves so that their bodies could exert 100% of their strength. In other words, Noah was the only one who had nothing to do at the moment. However, Noah was not to be blamed for that. For a godslayer, there was no need for him to adjust his state of mind. No matter how bad their condition was or how rusty their body was, once they wanted to fight from the bottom of their heart, their body would be stimulated with hormones stronger than adrenaline, allowing their body and mind to enter the best condition for battle in an instant. Therefore, for a godslayer, adjusting one's condition was completely unnecessary. That was because a godslayer was an existence that was born for battle. If an athlete did not persist in training, their physical strength would gradually decline, and their limbs would gradually become sluggish. Even if they persisted in training, once they reached a certain age, their physical condition would continue to deteriorate until they were only slightly stronger than the average person. However, a godslayer did not have this problem at all. It didn't matter how many years it had been since he had trained, or even if he hadn't done any sports, or even if he had completely forgotten how to fight. As long as they focused, raised their fighting spirit, and entered a state of battle, the godslayer's body and mind would immediately be adjusted to the perfect condition. They would never become weaker than before. The so-called godslayers were a group of beings that broke the rules. They would only become stronger and stronger. There was no reason for them to become weaker. Moreover, as long as they could fight, they would naturally become stronger even if they did not train, exercise, or learn. Therefore, the godslayers were monsters that were born for battle. Therefore, even the gods had no choice but to be wary of these demon kings. They chose a brave one to be in charge of annihilating these foul existences. As one of the godslayers, Noah's true power had long since surpassed that of the average godslayer, reaching an unprecedented level of power. Coupled with the godslayer's monstrous characteristics, it was no wonder that Noah was breaking more and more rules. Of course, these transgressions were merely the characteristics of the godslayer and could not be considered his strength. The true power of the godslayer lay in one thing: power. It was the power of the gods that had been forcibly seized from the gods in the heavens. Only when they had the right to use it could a godslayer be a match for the gods, surpassing the humans and reaching the realm of true godslayer. Therefore, authority was undoubtedly the true trump card of the godslayers. The rest of the godslayers were the same. Noah was the same. Noah reached out a hand and pressed it against his chest. He closed his eyes and immersed himself in the depths of his heart. There was a universe filled with nebulas. In the center of the universe, there was a stone plate with 10 connected patterns. On the surface, there was a sun with the imprint of a lion and a dragon. This stone plate was now in a deep slumber, giving off a lifeless feeling, because the time to use it had yet to come. However, he only needed to wait until dawn, and the stone plate would regain its vitality. At that time, Noah would be able to use his trump card power. As long as he waited until dawn, Noah's adaptation period would be over. At that time, Noah would be able to use the power of the oldest demon king with 3 digits, known as Az Dakaha of the final trial of mankind, and even surpass him in power. With that level of power, he would not even need a minute to deal with Athena. After all, Athena's power, in the box, was at most 4 digits. It was a piece of cake for a 3-digit number of people to deal with a 4-digit number of people. However, Noah did not have such thoughts. It was not that Noah did not respect Athena and felt that he did not need to use his full power against her. It was also not that Noah underestimated himself and felt that Athena's power was not enough for him to use his full power. Instead, Noah's intuition told him that, after dawn, the battle with Athena might not be able to be carried out. Noah didn't know why, but he had such a feeling. So, tonight is the night. Noah opened his eyes and looked at the night sky again. Tonight is the only chance for me to end things with Athena. Because of this, even if he could use his power at dawn, Noah still could not choose to wait. Tonight was the night to put an end to it. Just as Noah silently made up his mind, a few figures slowly walked out of the hotel door. Sensing the aura behind him, Noah turned around and looked in the direction of the hotel door. There, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui Na stood side by side, all looking at Noah. At this moment, there was no fear in the eyes of the 4 young girls. Even if they knew that they were about to face a god that humans could not reach, the 4 girls did not show the slightest fear. Perhaps, in the hearts of the girls, there was still a fear that Noah could not detect. But even so, the girls still chose to overcome their fear and move forward bravely. Erica and Liliana were determined to fight to the end as Noah's knights. Yoli and Hui Na were determined to protect this land as Witch Yuan. For this, the 4 girls would follow Noah and challenge the gods. Knowing the determination of the 4 girls, Noah wouldn't say anything that didn't look at the atmosphere. Under such circumstances, Noah only smiled, turned around, and looked forward. Let's go! Hearing this, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui Na all nodded slowly, their eyes surging with high fighting spirit. Crash! Amidst the clear sound of the waves crashed against the edge of the small island made of rocks before slowly retreating. It was an extremely dark place. In the night sky, there was no full moon, no stars, and no trace of light. In this night sky that completely eliminated all light sources, leaving only darkness, the rocky island was like the back of a giant man-eating beast, making people tremble with fear. At a certain moment, a dim light suddenly flashed from the edge of the sky, sweeping over like a meteor. The meteor-like dim light streaked across the sky and finally fell on the chilling rocky island, setting off a whirlwind. Then the dim light gradually dimmed, exposing the scene inside to the air. It was Noah and his group. Liliana used the witch's flight spell to bring everyone to the rocky island. As soon as they entered the rocky island, except for Noah, the vision of the 4 girls was completely blocked. It was not a mysterious effect, but simply because it was too dark, their vision could not capture anything at all. Noah had once absorbed the protozoan virus that could provide night vision, so he could see everything clearly at night. However, the girls were only ordinary humans and did not have night vision. However, the girls chose to use magic and incantations to make up for the lack of night vision. Light, please reside in our eyes, yin and yang, heaven and earth, light and darkness, advance and retreat. Erica and Liliana chanted night vision magic, while Yoli and Hui Na also used incantations to increase their vision. In this way, the surrounding environment was suddenly revealed to all the girls. However, it was precisely because of this that the next moment, the hearts of the girls suddenly jumped violently. Chapter 1467. In the dark moonlit night, on the small island that was filled with a terrifying atmosphere, creepy statues filled the surroundings of Noah's group. They were all petrified humanoid statues. Some of the people in the statues were wearing tattered cloth clothes, some were wearing armor, some were fully armed, and some were lightly armed. But without exception, all of them were carrying weapons, and the muscles on their bodies were bulging. Their physiques were strong, and they seemed to have an unusual sense of oppression. However, the four girls, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui Na, couldn't help but gasp when they saw the expressions on the statues. They were all muscular and armed, and it was clear that they weren't ordinary people at first glance. What kind of expression was that? Fear, wailing, or despair? The expressions and performances of the human-shaped statues perfectly displayed these emotions. They were extremely vivid, as if they were real people. And if they were real people, then what did these people experience before they were petrified to show such expressions and performances? No one, including Noah, could imagine. There was only one thing that was certain. That was, if these stone statues were real people, then they must have seen hell before they were petrified. The stone statues on the Serpent Island. Erica couldn't help but murmur. It's just like the Invisible Island. The Invisible Island. In Greek mythology, the island where the Medusa, the Gorgon, resided. In Greek mythology, Medusa, who was originally a goddess but was cursed by Athena and degenerated into a monster, lived on the island called the Invisible Island. Together with her two sisters, they were known as the Gorgon sisters. When they were still in the world of the form moon, Medusa, who was Noah's servant, said that no matter what era it was, there was never a lack of heroes who wanted to defeat monsters and become famous. Therefore, humans who were confident in their own abilities and wanted to become heroes continuously went to the Invisible Island to challenge the banshee living on the island. However, in the end, the dreams of these humans were cruelly shattered one after another. Their foolish challenge ended with them being turned into stone one by the snake-haired demoness known as Medusa. Now, Athena was on this island. On this island, there were countless stone statues of people who were clearly warriors. This scene was like a reenactment of the scene on the Invisible Island. I see, Liliana said with mixed feelings. Did that goddess choose to face her destined enemy in such a manner? No matter what era it was, there was never a lack of humans who wanted to defeat monsters and make a name for themselves. However, they ended up becoming sacrificial lambs because they overestimated themselves. But at the same time, no matter which era it was, the final outcome of the monsters was to be suppressed by the true heroes and become the souls of the dead under the heroes' swords. Athena was also a Medusa. That was why Athena chose to recreate the Invisible Island that once welcomed the human warriors as Medusa. The meaning behind it was to express his determination. Should they preserve their past glory and turn the challengers into stone statues and take them to their deaths? Or should they lose in the end and be suppressed by the true heroes and become the stepping stone of the true heroes' fame? Athena was looking forward to one of the two outcomes. This reminded Noah of Azrael Dakaha, the evil god of the fire worship sect, who was known as the final trial of humans, had once roared at Noah in such a manner. I am the absolute evil. What lies above my corpse is justice that was right. Since Azrael Dakaha was the absolute evil, then wouldn't the human hero who defeated the demonic dragon represent the absolute righteousness? The core of the fire worship sect was the dualism of good and evil. However, the existence of evil was only to highlight the importance of good. After all, only when evil existed in this world, humans who fought against it would become the true absolute righteousness. Without the existence of evil, the existence of good would also become dispensable. Just like how humans would only seek the light in the dark. Only when evil existed, humans would sincerely seek the absolute righteousness. The three-headed demonic dragon of the fire worship sect defined its existence as the absolute evil. It would not compromise with humans and spread despair and hell in the name of the final trial of mankind so that true absolute righteousness would never disappear from the world. That was the meaning of the existence of evil in the fire worship sect. Heroes would only be born in troubled times. Only in the darkness would light come. Righteousness would only appear in evil. Only in despair would there be hope. It was just like how Noah was disappointed by the hatred of the humans in the world of the Black Bullet, and chose to give up on saving the humans. In the end, he saw the only hope of the humans in despair. Now, Athena recreated the island of the snake demon and the legacy of the myth to express her resolve. She would not compromise with the humans. Only by defeating her could one become a true hero. However, this resolve was not directed at the entire human race. This time, Athena recreated the legend of the invisible island for one person. That person was Noah. It was not a challenge to the entire human race but a duel with one person. Here, the goddess named Athena displayed an awareness and spirit that was definitely not inferior to the final trial of mankind. Understanding this, Noah's entire body began to heat up, and an explosive force surged out of his back. At this time, Noah finally ignited his true fighting spirit. In order to live up to Athena's expectations. At this time, the silence was broken. Crack! Without any reason, a cracking sound was suddenly heard. Noah and the others' expressions froze as they turned their heads and looked at the source of the sound. There was a stone statue there. However, a crack suddenly appeared on the stone statue. This immediately caused a chain reaction. Crack, 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 crack. Around the group of people, the stone statues suddenly cracked without any warning and were full of cracks. At the same time, a powerful spell power fluctuated from the stone statues and spread to the surroundings. Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na took out their weapons without hesitation. With a leap, they surrounded Noah and Yoli in a triangular formation and were on guard. Almost at the same time, the cracking sound came to an abrupt end. Boom! A stone statue suddenly exploded, sending stone fragments all over the sky. Boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by the sound of explosions, the stone statues exploded one after another, raising a burst of dust. Soon after, numerous figures slowly appeared from the dust that filled the entire space. Yoli couldn't help but let out a small cry of surprise. Not only Yoli, but even Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na couldn't help but tighten their grip on their weapons. Noah furrowed his brows and scanned the surroundings sharply. From the dust, people appeared one after another. They were all stone statues before, but now they had turned into normal human warriors. However, none of these warriors had pupils. Their eyes were all sinister white, and their skin was shriveled. Their bodies swayed as they stood, like dried corpses. Noah had seen the same scene before. In the battle with Warban used the power of the Servant of Death to summon the dead to fight for him. They were in such a state. Be careful! Erica couldn't help but shout. Athena is also the god of the underworld. She can bestow death to humans and manipulate the dead. These people are most likely the human warriors who were summoned by Athena and petrified by the snake-haired demoness Medusa. They failed to challenge the snake-haired demoness. As soon as he finished speaking, the dead surrounding the group of people suddenly raised their heads, and their shaky bodies suddenly stabilized. The next moment, the dead rushed over one by one. Noah clenched his fists tightly as he watched the undead charging at him one after another with weapons in their hands like frenzied beasts. Chapter 1468. Heart of the Lion King, show the essence of the struggle in my hands, my wings, become the steel of the phantom blade. Silver Master Craftsman, bestow upon me strength, Gwawan, Taboo Duck, Long Words Mother, Silk Flute Cowards. When the hordes of the dead charged toward Noah's group, Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na chanted incantations at once, instilling the spell power in their bodies into the weapons in their hands. The group of undead charging at the front immediately howled and pounced at Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na. They mercilessly swung their rusty weapons at the three girls. Undoubtedly, the weapons were covered in rust and looked like they couldn't even cut through a piece of cloth. However, they easily tore through the air, stirring up sonic booms, and slashed down heavily at the three slender girls as though they wanted to cut them in half. Clang! Along with the neat sound of metal clashing, the weapons in the hands of the dead at the front were all blocked by the weapons in Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na's hands, stirring up a burst of sparks. At that moment, the three girls let out soft groans one after another. Although they successfully blocked the attacks of the dead, the weapons in front of Erica, Liliana, and Huina each rubbed fiercely against at least 3 or 4 rusty weapons, enduring the simultaneous attacks of 3 or 4 dead. As a result, Erica, Liliana, and Huina each had to deal with at least 3 or 4 dead, bearing a great impact. Under such circumstances, the group of dead armed with weapons continued to charge in the direction of the group. Their ferocious eyes without pupils bloomed with a ferocious glint that represented madness. If the dead charged over and launched attacks, Erica, Liliana, and Huina definitely wouldn't be able to stop them this time. Huina immediately used the God Descend spell without any hesitation. O divine wind, cleansing rain. Taking Susanu's divine power into her body and summoning the authority of the storm god, Huina's whole body burst into a whirlwind, and she shook it away. With a loud roar, the charging dead were all blown away by the storm, one by one, and they were all sent flying backward. Seeing this, Liliana's eyes turned cold and she stabbed the Grandmaster Silver Craftsman's sword into the ground. Mother who gives and takes life, give me the landmarks of the dark land. Ripples of curse power spread out from the center of the Grandmaster Silversmith, creating ripples on the ground. Wherever the invisible ripples passed, the ground would instantly soften and turn into a swamp. The corpses that were blown away by the storm struggled to get up, but the ground suddenly turned into a swamp and swallowed their bodies, causing them to sink into the ground one after another. Not letting go of this opportunity, Erica threw the Lion King's heart into the sky. Mission to the Steel Lion. Tear, pierce, bite, defeat, annihilate, and victory. I entrust you to this battlefield. The Lion King's heart, that was thrown high, suddenly trembled, then suddenly began to distort. The distorted Lion King's heart began to expand like a ball of light and gradually gathered into a ball. Finally, it turned into a steel lion that fell from the sky and landed on the ground. The steel lions roared and pounced on the corpses that had sunk into the swamp-like ground. The dead man who was trapped in the swamp swung his rusty weapon at the lion that was pouncing on him. The steel lions directly bit the rusty weapons with their sharp teeth and swung their sharp claws, trying to tear the corpses that were trapped. As a result, the steel lions and the corpses that were trapped in the swamp began to fight, causing roars and roars to resound over the entire island. The group of corpses and the steel lions fought each other, and for a moment, they fell into a stalemate. However, the stalemate was destined to only last for a while. This was because in the surrounding forest, swaying silhouettes began to appear one after another, slowly making their way towards this place. There was no doubt that those black figures were also the souls of the deceased that Athena had awakened. When they all joined the battle, the situation would definitely take a turn for the worse. After all, those corpses were all human warriors who were confident in their abilities when they were alive and dared to go to the invisible island to challenge the snake-haired demon Medusa. Even though they were now dead, had lost their minds, and had lost their abilities, there were still many of them. With the strength of Erica, Liliana, and Huina, it wasn't that easy to stop the group of corpses. For this reason, Yoli kept concentrating, closing her eyes, praying, and activating the curse power in her body in an attempt to obtain spirit vision and see the weaknesses of the group of corpses. Erica, Liliana, and Huina were still in a triangular formation, protecting Noah and Yoli in the middle. One was controlling the steel lions to fight a group battle. One was manipulating the earth to trap the group of corpses. The remaining one was constantly waving a storm, blowing away the approaching corpses. The group of girls grasped their tasks well one by one, and only then did they manage to block the group of corpses. Noah, who was protected by Erica, Liliana, and Huina in the middle, looked at the stalemate situation. His brows furrowed deeper and deeper, and he couldn't help but feel a little impatient. Perhaps seeing through the anxiety in Noah's heart, Erica spoke to Noah while controlling the steel lions. "Go and look for Athena. Leave this to us." Hearing this, Noah was slightly startled. After hesitating for a moment, he asked with uncertainty, "Can you do it, Era?" A fierce and confident smile like a lioness appeared on Erica's face. "Who do you think I am? Go!" "Your Majesty," Liliana said with a stern face. We will definitely bring you victory. If it's against a god, Huina has no confidence, but it's just some undead. Let's see how Huina exorcises them. Huina said in a cheerful tone while rolling up a storm. Your Majesty's opponent should be a god that even Huina and the others can't deal with. Leave these undead to Huina and the others. After saying that, Erica, Liliana, and Huina all revealed determined and confident looks. Gazing at the slender but reliable backs of the three girls, Noah took a deep breath and made a decision in his heart. With a flip of his hand, a rather gorgeous scabbard appeared in Noah's hand. 1,000 Mile Valley. Noah stuffed the scabbard in his hand into Yoli's arms. This scabbard has the power to protect and heal you. I've stored enough spell power in it. I'll leave it to you for safekeeping. Use it properly. Yoli was stunned for a moment, but then he nodded with a serious face. I understand. After Yoli took the scabbard, Noah took out 4 bottles of potions filled with blue liquid and stuffed them into the palms of the 4 girls. This is a spiritual medicine that can quickly restore spell power. Drink it, and no matter how you use spells for at least an hour, you won't have to worry about running out of spell power. Hearing Noah's words, Liliana couldn't help but be a little surprised. There's actually such a spiritual medicine? What a powerful support! Erica held the potion in her hand tightly and smiled sweetly. This way, Erica Brantley will transform into a more valiant knight than a paladin. She can use Calvary without any scruples. Huina too. With the scabbard in Yoli's hand that can heal the body, Huina can use Invite God to descend without any scruples, Huina said loudly. So, Your Majesty, you can rest assured. Noah nodded heavily. Chapter 1469. Tap, clear footsteps echoed rhythmically in the surrounding space. Noah walked in at a leisurely pace. This place was a ruin. It looked like a luxurious palace. The surrounding walls were covered with vines and thorns. Numerous stone pillars stood in the spacious hall. They were engraved with snake-shaped patterns. It was as if there were extremely nimble snakes coiling around the pillars. They exuded an extremely ancient aura. It was the aura of snakes. It was like sticky blood, but also like a pungent fishy smell. It did not bring any discomfort, but instead, it gave off a sacred aura. While feeling the aura, Noah slowly walked forward. Noah raised his eyes and looked forward. An ancient wall that was also branded with snake-shaped patterns appeared there. In front of the wall, there was a throne. The Snake Queen, known for her beauty and wisdom, was sitting on the throne. She was still wearing the same ancient Greek-style dress. His entire body was rippling with divine power visible to the naked eye, like waves of air. Athena opened her eyes and looked at Noah with her snake-like, owl-like eyes. In that pair of indescribable charming eyes, a coquettish light shone brightly in the pitch-black moonlit night. Noah's and Athena's gazes finally met. Athena stared into Noah's deep, dark eyes as if she had tasted an intoxicating wine, and she spoke with satisfaction. Your eyes are full of fighting spirit and very high. It's completely different from the last time. My efforts were not in vain. Athena's words made Noah squint his eyes. I see. You saw that I didn't want to fight you last time? Of course, my eyes are not so muddy that I can't see whether a warrior has the will to fight or not, Athena said proudly. This concubine is the god of war, and also the goddess of unparalleled wisdom. This concubine only needs a single glance to see whether this concubine's destined enemy wants to fight or not. That was why Athena did not fight with Noah immediately. Instead, she summoned the mythological beast in an attempt to stimulate Noah's fighting spirit. However, Noah used the mythological beast summoned by Athena to let Electra, Yuri, Liliana, and Huina win one battle, provoking Athena's self-esteem and forcing her to leave. In other words, the battle between Noah and Athena had actually started from the beginning. However, it was not in the form of martial arts, but in the form of intelligence. For me, the goddess of wisdom, to compete with intelligence is not a bad thing, but it is just for fun. It can't quell the surging passion in my heart. Athena, who was sitting on the throne, stared intently at Noah, her snake eyes emitting scorching emotions. As expected, the battle with you must be decided by martial arts. Therefore, I am not unhappy about your perfunctory attitude last time, but I am not satisfied either. Do you understand? Hearing this, Noah fell silent. After a while, Noah smiled helplessly. Goddess, famous for your beauty and wisdom, have you never thought about why I don't want to fight with you? There are many reasons why humans don't want to fight, but in the end, it's because they don't have enough awareness. Athena looked straight at Noah. My destined enemy, isn't the reason why you don't want to fight not because you don't have enough awareness? If you want to say that I don't have enough awareness, I guess you can say that, right? Noah shrugged and met Athena's gaze. After all, I won't want to fight to the death with someone I like for no reason. Athena was taken aback by his words. Under Athena's startled expression, Noah continued as if he was talking to himself. Although I have an ill-fated relationship with you, and I am extremely disgusted by your values of treating humans as trash, that is a characteristic of the gods of disobedience. Therefore, apart from this, I do have an extraordinary good impression of the goddess named Athena. Who would ignite their fighting spirit for no reason at all towards the person they have a good impression of? The scene suddenly fell into an indescribable silence. Athena stared straight at Noah, her snake eyes flashing slightly, as if she wanted to see through Noah's true thoughts and expose his lies. However, Noah didn't avoid Athena's gaze. Instead, he walked up to her and stared back at her. Looking at Noah's deep eyes that were as calm as the night sky, Athena suddenly laughed. And it was the kind of laughter that would cause her to convulse with laughter. In other words, you are my fated enemy. Do you have feelings for me? Athena said to Noah with a joyful smile. You actually dare to court the queen of the gods, goddess Athena? There should be a limit to your arrogance. But thinking about it, perhaps it wouldn't be too much to describe the ill-fated relationship between you and me as love. However, you are my fated enemy. I am the queen of the divine realm, the supreme goddess of wisdom, and the eternal virgin goddess. Athena narrowed her snake eyes. Even the gods are unable to win the love of the eternal virgin goddess. Although you are the demon king who killed the gods, you are just a mere human. Do you have the magnanimity to bear the love of Athena? What about you? Haven't you always claimed that you want to take me as your possession? Noah curled his lips into a smile, but his dark and deep eyes gradually burned with a bright light. Does the queen of the divine realm, the Trinity, have the ability to bear my love? Noah's words made Athena laugh again, but her snake eyes were burning with an astonishing fighting spirit just like Noah's. That's why I said, there should be a limit to your arrogance. Athena is the eternal virgin goddess, and the love of a mortal is just a pile of rubble by the roadside. There is no need to pay attention to it. Athena slowly stood up, her eyes never leaving Noah. However, I am the queen of the divine realm. Even if you are my fated enemy, doubting the queen's ability is a great disrespect. Let me properly prove whether or not Athena has the ability to make you the goddess' possession. A terrifying amount of curse powers surged out from Athena's body. Athena will use all her strength to crusade against the goddess' fated enemy. No, Adoria, prove your magnanimity to me, the eternal virgin goddess. The surging curse power fluctuated in this space, causing the air to freeze, the ground to tremble, and the night to tremble. At this time, the strength of the curse power surging from Athena's body had already surpassed that of the great sage. The night is my domain, and this island is the mythical place where my snake nature reappears. In this night, in this mythical place, my power will rise to the highest peak in history. Athena carried an astonishing aura that seemed to compress the whole world into her slender body, and she revealed a rather sinister smile at Noah. You are about to face an unprecedentedly powerful goddess, Noah Doria. Under such circumstances, do you still have the guts to woo Athena? Listening to Athena's seemingly joyful and provocative words, feeling the astonishing and terrifying aura, Noah suddenly smiled. Why do you think I chose to come here at night to settle things with you? At night, Athena's power would increase significantly. It was precisely because he understood this that Noah chose to come here at night. Knowing that Athena's power would increase during this period of time, he still chose this time to settle things. This was why Yerek claimed that Noah was indeed a godslayer. Only a godslayer would do such a reckless thing in order to satisfy his desire for a battle. However, Noah did not do this to satisfy his desire for battle. I only have one reason for doing this. Noah's entire body surged with terrifying curse power. It is to completely defeat you. Chapter 1470. 1. In the dark temple, two extremely violent curses shook and swept out like a storm. As if fighting for the ownership of space, they collided and squeezed each other, causing the space to tremble and shake. Noah and Athena's eyes met, and their eyes burned with an astonishing fighting spirit. Although they called each other fated and ill-fated, in fact, if one really wanted to count, this should be the first time Noah and Athena had a battle to the death. When they first met, Athena had not yet recovered her identity as the queen of the divine realm, and Noah had just obtained his authority and become a god-slayer. Both of them were not mature. At that time, although Noah and Athena had a short confrontation, it was indeed quite short. They did not even exchange a single move, so it could not be considered a battle at all. Therefore, this was the first time Noah and Athena had a real battle in the truest sense. However, the fighting spirit in their hearts were unusually high. Gazing at Athena, who was standing in front of the throne, wearing an ancient Greek-style dress that swayed back and forth under the huge waves of curses, Noah's mind moved. In his body, the energy source that was filled with boundless energy suddenly turned into a source of divine might. The divine might energy surged towards Noah's limbs like a torrential stream. Athena was not only the goddess of the earth, but also the goddess of darkness who dominated the underworld, and the goddess of wisdom who controlled the wisdom of the heavens. Because she was always accompanied by these three attributes, Athena was the goddess of the Trinity. Now, under the night, Athena's divinity as the goddess of darkness had greatly increased, and on this invisible island, the earth attribute, which symbolized the snake, had also greatly increased. In this case, the miraculous effect of the demon slayer to break the power of curses would certainly greatly reduce the threat of the goddess of earth and darkness. After all, the demon slayer could even kill demon King Solomon, who had the power of the dark elf king who could control the elements of darkness. Its holy characteristics were undoubtedly the most lethal weapon for the goddess of death and darkness. The godhead that represented the Athena serpent was Medusa. The evil eye of this demoness could turn everything in her sight into stone. Even the godslayer's curse resistance could not completely block it. However, if it was the curse-breaking power of the demon slayer, it would definitely be able to break the petrification curse. In addition, Noah's ultimate sword skill was a combination of sword skills and divine power. Without divine power and the fairy device, its true power could not be unleashed. Therefore, when the battle was on the verge of breaking out, Noah did not hesitate to transform the energy in his body into the source of divine power and used the weapon refinement magic. Clank! A dazzling white light blossomed from Noah's hand, converging into the shape of a sword. The silver holy sword flashed in the dazzling light and fell into Noah's hand. A large amount of divine power was immediately poured into the demon slayer, causing a dazzling white light to shine, dispelling the surrounding darkness and illuminating the entire space. Oh, what an unpleasant light! Athena frowned her beautiful eyebrows, but then smiled pleasantly. However, if it's not to this extent, then it won't be interesting. As soon as she finished speaking, Athena's figure suddenly turned into a dark shadow, and like a materialized darkness, she swept toward Noah. A dense darkness appeared in Athena's hand, and converged into a huge scythe that fell into Athena's hand. Let me see if your light is stronger, or if my darkness is stronger. After saying this, Athena, who had turned into a shadow, shot in front of Noah. The pitch-black scythe in her hand cut through the air, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, drawing a perfect arc, and heavily chopped towards Noah's throat. Noah, who had long been prepared for battle, tightened his grip on the silver holy sword, and the divine power in his body surged. His footsteps slightly slowed, and then his whole body turned into a bolt of lightning, violently rushing out. Absolute Sword Technique. Initial form Purple Lightning. The Purple Lightning Sword skill was one of the most commonly used absolute sword skills. This was because the average person would not be able to deal with the thrusts that were as fast as lightning. As long as there was a slight delay in reaction, the user of this absolute sword technique would be in an invincible position. Once, Versilia was instantly defeated by Renasubel's Purple Lightning, and her mind was distorted because of it. In other words, if one could not even withstand the initial form of the absolute sword technique, then the opponent was not qualified to make the user of the absolute sword technique use her full strength. Therefore, the user of the absolute sword technique would usually use the initial form of the Purple Lightning. Noah was the same. Thus, a strike comparable to lightning directly swept out, violently stabbing the pitch-black scythe that was chopping towards him. Clang! In the sound of a bell, the holy sword and the black scythe suddenly collided, setting off a circle of strong wind, sweeping out. Then, with the sound of water being poured on fire, in Noah's hand, a dazzling white light flashed from the silver holy sword on the black scythe, expelling the fog that was surging on it, dispersing it. Seeing this, Athena bit her lips and was speechless. Sure enough, it is an unpleasant light. Hearing this, Noah laughed. The best part is yet to come. After saying this, Noah's body suddenly spun, and the holy sword in his hand was like a full moon, flashing through space. Absolute Sword Technique. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. The holy sword flashing white light immediately turned into a ray of moonlight, with a cold but fatal arc, fiercely slashing towards Athena's delicate body. This slash first cut the surrounding darkness, and then as fast as the moonlight, it slashed towards Athena's direction, giving the illusion that a full moon suddenly appeared in the darkness. Seeing that her own darkness was easily expelled by the light of the holy sword, Athena did not dare to underestimate it, and hurriedly raised the black scythe in her hand, and poured her divine power into it, causing the black scythe to flash with a black light. As if the darkness was solid, it emerged on the black scythe. Clang! The holy sword flashing white light and the scythe flashing black light suddenly fiercely collided, causing the white light and the black light to soar almost at the same time, like fierce beasts devouring each other, frantically eroding each other. It's not over yet. At this time, Noah suddenly clenched his free hand into a fist, and ferocious blue veins bulged on his arm, and with a whistling sound and an ear-piercing explosion, he punched towards Athena. The fist carrying great power suddenly enlarged in Athena's eyes, causing a strong fighting spirit to appear in Athena's eyes, and on her delicate body, a substantial darkness like mist shook out. Bang! The powerful punch heavily bombarded the mist-like darkness from Athena's body, causing a muffled sound that made people's hearts tremble, and also set off a violent wind, shaking the ground inch by inch. Then, the white light and black light that were eroding each other seemed to have been detonated, and the whole thing exploded. Dong! Amidst an astonishing loud noise, a violent impact mixed with white and black light blasted out, shattering the ground, disorienting the air, and causing the entire temple to tremble. Two figures simultaneously shot out from the impact of the white and black light, and the soles of their feet brushed against the ground, each drawing a mark of hundreds of meters. Then both of them raised their eyes and looked straight at each other, their eyes surging with extremely strong emotions. As expected of my fated enemy. Just the fact that you can rival a deity in martial arts is enough to prove your strength. Driven by her high emotions, the darkness in Athena's body soared. But, only like this? That's not enough. Far from enough. You are my fated enemy. Amidst the loud shout, a fatal black wind spread out from Athena's body. Chapter 1471. A storm of black wind rose from Athena's body, like a burning black flame that kept rising. In the dense darkness, Athena's figure floated like a feather. Her body was enveloped by pitch-black flames, and she raised the black scythe in her hand high above her head. Then, Athena's voice resounded from the darkness. Light can indeed expel darkness, but darkness can also devour light. My fated enemy, let Athena's darkness devour your light. In the midst of Athena's loud declaration, the darkness that was like a burning black flame suddenly twisted and turned into a giant black snake. Athena, who was floating at the 7-inch position of the giant black snake, swung her black scythe down in Noah's direction. As Athena's black scythe slashed down, the pitch-black giant snake made of dense darkness lifted its huge head and aimed at Noah, as if it was hunting for food. The upper half of its body suddenly rushed out. The giant black snake's body was quite large. Although it was not as big as the giant dragon that Letitia had summoned using the sun of Ophiuchus constellation as a medium, its head alone was as big as a city. However, the head of the pitch-black giant snake was as big as a building. Therefore, when the entire upper body of the giant pitch-black snake suddenly swooped down and opened its huge mouth that was filled with dense darkness in Noah's direction, Noah's entire vision was blocked, and his clothes fluttered wildly under the attack of the wind and waves. It felt as though an entire pitch-black mountain had suddenly smashed down from the sky and was pressing down on Noah, causing his scalp to go numb. Even Noah had the same feeling. Therefore, Noah knew very well that Athena's words were not wrong. Even if the demon slayer had a strong restraining effect on darkness, if the target of the sword was too dark, it would only be devoured instead. If the demon slayer, in Noah's hand, was the elven magic device of the strongest sword spirit, then perhaps, with Aster's power and the support of Noah's endless divine power, no darkness could devour the light of the holy sword. However, Aster was still sleeping to awaken his true power. The demon slayer, in Noah's hand, was only an imitation made with the weapon refinement, magic. Although the weapon refinement, magic imitated the weapon's performance would not be weaker than the original, there were other restrictions. For example, the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, and the White Dragon Emperor's divine dividing wings, although they could be imitated with the weapon refinement, magic, they could not be imitated with the balance breaker, magic. In this way, under the huge restriction of being able to use the ability once every 10 seconds, their usefulness in battle would be reduced by a lot, to the point that they would not be useful in many high-level battles. The Demon Slayer was the same. Even if it was imitated, its performance would not be weaker than Aster's before he went into hibernation. However, the imitated equipment would only have performance and not a spirit. Without the cooperation of a contracted spirit, the power of the elven magic device would be reduced by more than half. As such, the replica of the Demon Slayer might not be able to break through Athena's darkness at full power. Immediately, Noah looked at the huge pitch-black snake head that was whistling over, and a solemn expression flashed across his eyes. Thus, with a thought, Noah's divine aura source that was filled with an endless supply of divine aura in his body suddenly turned and transformed into energy once again. However, this time, the energy in the source of divine aura did not completely transform into magic power, divine aura, or divine aura. Instead, with a tremor, it transformed into magic power and divine aura. In the case of using two types of energy at the same time, the output of each type of energy would be reduced by half. Fortunately, the current Noah had the dragon's sovereignty of the sun to strengthen the output of the energy, greatly reducing the disadvantage of the output being reduced by half to in the next moment. Accompanied by the sound of vibration, a huge golden ripple spread out from the ground in front of Noah. Immediately, a shield that was like a city wall suddenly rose from the huge golden ripple, standing in front of Noah and firmly protecting Noah. And in the instant that the huge shield that was like a city wall suddenly appeared, the huge black snake head that was rushing over also brought along a terrifying fluctuation, whistling down and heavily landing on the thick shield. Dong! Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar resounded in this vast temple, and it shook the echo. Like invisible ripples, it carried a substantial impact and spread out. Pang! Wherever the terrifying shock wave passed, the temple floor that exuded an ancient aura suffered the most serious damage. Like broken glass, it burst open very simply. Even the rubble that was lifted up was shaken into powder, which was shocking. Pang! The terrifying shock wave was still spreading, causing the pillars that were branded with snake-shaped lines to shatter and crack under the impact. Under such circumstances, the stone pillars fell down one by one, making the entire temple seem like it was collapsing, shaking repeatedly. At this time, even the ceiling of the temple could not continue to maintain its original shape. In the sound of kacha-kacha, cracks kept appearing. Pieces of rubble suddenly fell from the ceiling, pouring down like raindrops. For a time, the entire temple seemed to be ravaged by an earthquake, and it was on the verge of collapse. It was only at this moment that the pitch-black giant serpent slowly lifted its upper body from the thick sand and dust that pervaded the air like a spring. Inside the pitch-black giant snake, Athena, holding a black scythe, stared at the spreading thick sand and dust, a pair of cold snake eyes flashing slightly. At a certain moment, Athena's pretty face changed slightly. At this instant, numerous black figures shot out from the dense sand and dust that filled the air like lightning. The bodies of the black shadows were silver chains flowing with golden light, and the front end carried wedges of different shapes. These chains shot out one after another from the thick sand and dust that filled the air. Like arrows that had been released from a bow, they shot towards the pitch-black giant serpent that had raised its huge serpent head. Then, the chains suddenly wrapped around the body of the pitch-black giant snake, binding the long snake body. The pitch-black giant snake suddenly let out a soundless roar and began to struggle with all its might, twisting its huge snake body. However, the chains were firmly wrapped around the giant snake's body. No matter how much the giant snake struggled, there was no crack at all. As the goddess of wisdom, Athena's extraordinary eyesight could see the nature of the chains tightly wrapped around the pitch-black giant snake's body. She could not help but be shocked. How could this be? However, the thing that really shocked Athena was yet to come. Golden ripples suddenly flashed in front of her like water waves. Inside, there were various weapons such as swords, sabers, spears, halberds, and so on that seemed to have popped out of the water and appeared in front of Athena's eyes. Athena's extraordinary wisdom allowed her to instantly see through the essence of each and every piece of equipment like she had just done. Therefore, Athena could almost recognize them in an instant. At this moment, each of the weapons before him was a god relic that was famous in all sorts of myths. That was not all. Among the weapons, there were even prototypes of famous god relics. Now, all of these weapons were aimed at Athena. In the next second, the weapons turned into beams of light and shot toward Athena, whose expression changed abruptly. Chapter 1472. Swish, 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 swish. Amidst a series of sharp and clear sonic booms, sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and all sorts of other weapons turned into beams of light. They tore through space at extreme speeds, shooting towards the giant black snake like a storm. Tightly bound by the chains, the giant black snake could not break free at all. It could only watch as the weapons turned into beams of light and shot towards it. It could not put up any resistance at all. As a result, the blades, swords, spears, halberds, and all sorts of weapons that shot out like a violent storm instantly landed on the pitch-black giant snake. Bang! Amidst the muffled explosion, a weapon that had turned into a beam of light exploded a corner of the giant black snake, forcibly cutting a hole in its surface. Bang, 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 bang. Immediately after, various weapons such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on continuously bombarded the pitch-black giant snake's body, causing the pitch-black mist-like darkness to explode one after another, causing a series of muffled explosions to ring out. With just a single wave of attacks, the gigantic pitch-black snake was riddled with holes by the weapons that came shooting over. Every part of its body was pierced through. Under such circumstances, the pitch-black snake that was riddled with holes finally couldn't even maintain its form. Dong! The black serpent made of darkness disintegrated amidst the explosion, turning back into an extremely dense darkness. In the darkness, Athena, who was holding the black scythe, retreated as if she was caught in a storm. It didn't take long for her to break through the darkness and fly out from the other end of the thick darkness. However, almost at the same time, a protrusion slowly appeared in front of the thick sand and dust on the ground. Along with the sound of tearing wind, a figure rushed out from the protrusion in the thick sandstorm, heading straight for Athena, who was retreating in midair. Athena, who was still shocked by the sight of the god relics that only existed in myths and legends, immediately raised her head and looked at the figure that was charging at her at an alarming speed. She immediately lifted the black scythe in her hand. At the same time, Noah's figure appeared in front of Athena in a flash. His pair of deep, dark eyes stared straight at Athena's slightly shocked face. He raised the holy silver sword in his hand high up and swung it down hard. Clang! The holy sword that was shining in a dazzling white light with terrifying power slashed hard on the black scythe that was hurriedly raised in midair. A powerful force instantly passed through the black scythe and hit Athena's body. Under the impact of the huge force, Athena was sent flying along with her scythe. She slammed into a stone pillar covered with snake-like patterns. She didn't know what to do next. She didn't know what to do next. Bang! With a loud explosion, the stone pillar that was hit by Athena broke and fell to the ground with a loud crash, stirring up a cloud of dust. In the dust, Athena, who had her back hit the stone pillar directly, could not help but let out an extremely soft groan. She clenched her teeth, tightened her grip on the black scythe in her hand, and swung it forward suddenly. The dust that filled the air was immediately cut open by the black scythe, and was blown away by the whistling wind that came along with the black scythe. Then Athena saw it. Noah, who was holding the holy sword that was shining in a dazzling white light, leaped high into the air. Under the soles of his feet, a circle of divine aura gathered and exploded, releasing all of it in one breath. Noah's figure turned into a ray of light and dove down at an astonishing speed. Ultimate sword skill. Form 2 meteor. This was the derivative of the initial form, purple lightning. The principle used was the same as the initial form of purple lightning, which was to gather the divine aura under the feet and release it in one breath. It was an ultimate sword skill that could explode at an extremely fast speed. However, unlike the initial form of purple lightning that could only be used horizontally, the second form of meteor was an ultimate sword skill that was used for aerial attacks and had absolute control of the air. Since ancient times, the side that had absolute control of the air would have a huge advantage whether it was in battle or war. This was a principle that had never changed since ancient times. After all, between an opponent who could fly and an opponent who could not, which side was more difficult to deal with, there was no need to explain. Therefore, even though the second form, meteor, was only a simple evolution of the initial form, purple lightning, turning a horizontal thrust into a high-altitude thrust, with the help of air control and the acceleration of gravity, the power and speed of this ultimate sword technique was superior to that of purple lightning. Therefore, Noah, who was holding the silver holy sword, directly turned into a meteor that fell from the sky, bringing with it a whistling wind, and violently pierced towards Athena's direction. In the blink of an eye, the tip of the silver holy sword was less than 2 meters away from Athena. In this moment of imminent peril, Athena's body suddenly burst with a black light. This was different from the extremely dense darkness from before. If the previous darkness was said to be as dense as the sewage in a swamp, then at this moment, the black light from Athena's body was like a transparent crystal. This kind of translucent black light expanded in the air, converging in front of Athena, and in the midst of the trembling sound, the black light condensed and turned into a shield. It was a thick shield that seemed to be made of obsidian, with the head of a gorgon carved on the front. Noah recognized this shield. Its name was Aegis. In Greek mythology, the goddess of wisdom, Athena, had the head of the gorgon Medusa embedded in it, and it had the ability to petrify. The meteor sword that fell from the sky immediately landed heavily on the pitch-black shield. Ding! In an extremely crisp sound of collision, the tip of the silver holy sword violently pierced the shield named Aegis, causing a burst of sparks. Swish! At the same time, the goddess, who was famous for her beauty and wisdom, flashed out from behind the shield. The black scythe in her hand had a cold arc of light and a fatal black light as it ruthlessly slashed at Noah's neck. That attack did not even reach Noah's neck, but Noah felt a chill on his neck, causing his heart to tighten. Logically speaking, Noah was strengthened by the sovereignty of the Leo constellation's sun sovereign, so it could achieve true invulnerability and would not be injured by sharp weapons like the scythe. However, Athena's black scythe was not a simple weapon, but a power formed by condensing the power of darkness. As the god of the underworld, Athena's black scythe was like the scythe of the god of death. It could directly bring about death and harm the soul. Noah had reason to believe that even if he relied on the sovereignty of the Leo constellation to become invulnerable to weapons and weapons to block the attack of the black scythe, the power of the black scythe that could even harm the soul would definitely not be able to block it. Therefore, this attack must be blocked. Wave-like golden ripples suddenly flashed in the air. Inside, a thick shield appeared, blocking in front of the black scythe. Clang! The black scythe slashed down heavily and landed on the thick and heavy shield, causing a strong shockwave and sparks to burst out once again. At this moment, Athena's pair of snake eyes shrunk to the size of a needle. There was no other reason. The shield that appeared from the golden ripples and blocked the black scythe was very familiar to Athena. Its entire body was made of obsidian, thick and heavy. The front of the shield had the head of a gorgon. Other than Aegis, what else could it be? Kaboom! Under the impact of Athena's attack, the stone pillar that was broken in two finally collapsed, and under the tremor of the ground, a cloud of dust rose. Pa! In the crisp sound of landing, Noah and Athena fell from the air at the same time and steadily landed on the ground, facing each other with the broken pillar in between. Everyone was suddenly silent. Athena, who was holding the black scythe, raised her head and looked straight in the direction of Noah. She was surprised and puzzled. Why do you have that shield? Chapter 1473. Looking at all the major mythological systems, there were only two sides to the shield named Aegis. One side belonged to Zeus, the king of the gods in Greek mythology. Therefore, the shield was also known as the Aegis shield. The other side belonged to Athena. It was Athena's god relic. From the perspective of Type Moon's worldview, if every heroic spirit's noble artifact was a symbol of itself and limited to all the myths and legends of the heroic spirit, then Athena's symbol was the shield. Aegis. It was a legendary shield that was exclusive to Athena. It was embedded with the head of the Gorgon Medusa and had the head of the Gorgon Medusa. It had the head of the Gorgon Medusa, and it had the ability to turn anything the head of the head looked at into cold stone. This shield was still in Athena's possession. Of course, the Aegis that Athena was currently using was only an authority manifested by divine power. In other words, Athena was able to use her authority to manifest the Aegis that she had used in the legends, and others could also use a similar method to use a replica of the Aegis. However, Athena sized up the shield in Noah's hand again and again. Athena was also holding a similar shield in her hand. Athena, who kept looking at the shield in Noah's hand, had to admit that shield was definitely not a replica. As the goddess of wisdom, Athena's extraordinary eyesight allowed her to easily recognize the ancient aura on the shield. It could not be a replica. However, that shield was definitely not the real thing. That might not be correct. To be more precise, the shield was definitely not the Aegis that Athena knew of. In other words, the shield that Noah was holding now was not a replica, but it was also not the Aegis that Athena knew. Could it be that there was another side to the shield that belonged to Athena? And that side was also the real thing? How was that possible? Although Zeus also had a shield named Aegis, that shield was completely different from Athena's. The most basic difference was that Athena's Aegis was embedded with the head of the Medusa, which possessed the power of petrification. On the other hand, Zeus's Aegis had the power to create a storm just by waving it around. When it was placed in the sky would darken, but when it was picked up, the sky would clear up. The only similarity between the two was that they had the same name. Moreover, they were both made from the skin of the ewe that Hephaestus gave birth to Zeus in Greek mythology. Therefore, Athena could guarantee that Aegis, which possessed the power of petrification, could not possibly have another side to it. This was because it was impossible for there to be a second Medusa's head. But if that was the case, what exactly was the divine shield in Noah's hand that had an ancient divine aura? Even the goddess of wisdom, who claimed to possess wisdom, furrowed her brows at this moment due to the conflicting reality. No, it's not just my shield. You even used many famous god relics just now, and even the original versions of those god relics. I can't be wrong. Athena stared at Noah with her seductive snake eyes, and her tone became extremely unhappy. How did you do it? Athena did not realize it at all. At this moment, her extremely unhappy tone made it seem as if she was throwing a tantrum. Athena had to admit it. Even though she was known as the goddess of wisdom, she could not tell the truth about how Noah could use those famous god relics. It was like a slap in the face, and Athena was extremely unhappy. Noah smiled faintly and threw Aegis away, allowing the golden ripples to engulf the shield. Then, he raised the sacred sword in his hand and pointed it at Athena. Do you want to know my secret? How about I ask the goddess of wisdom to solve it yourself? What a low-level provocation, my fated enemy. Athena squinted her snake eyes and pursed her lips into a smile. However, you're right. Once you've been taken into the underworld that this concubine is in charge of, and even your soul has become this concubine's possession, this concubine will then slowly unravel the mystery surrounding you. Athena stared straight at Noah as she said that. Her eyes shone as if she could see through all the secrets of a person's body, including the secret of why you haven't used your authority until now, but you still have the power to fight against God. Athena's words made Noah's heart skip a beat. This goddess, she can even see through Noah's inability to use his power until now? You actually didn't use your full strength against me, your fated enemy. I originally wanted to teach you a lesson. Athena stared at Noah and said, but at this point in the battle, I can see that it's not that you don't want to use your authority, but that for some reason, you can't use your authority. So, I'll forgive you. After saying that, Athena suddenly sneered. However, don't think that I will show mercy because of this. You are my fated enemy. Next, you will receive an attack that I will use all of my divine power to launch. As soon as she finished speaking, dense darkness swept out from Athena's body like a storm and soon occupied half of the entire temple. Seeing this, Noah's eyes narrowed. Under such circumstances, Athena raised the shield in her hand. At some unknown time, the shield had suddenly transformed into a powerful bow. Athena raised the bow and stared in Noah's direction. She reached out and slowly pulled the bowstring. Suddenly, the darkness that filled the sky began to gather rapidly and condensed into Athena's slowly pulled bowstring. Not long after, a pitch-black arrow appeared on the bowstring. Moreover, the monstrous curse power and darkness were constantly instilled into the pitch-black arrow, causing the temperature between heaven and earth to plummet. As the powerful curse power and darkness condensed into the pitch-black arrow one after another, Athena's face gradually turned pale. Obviously, Athena wasn't joking around. This goddess really intended to use all of her curse power to launch the final attack. Huff! Looking at the darkness that seemed to be rushing towards Athena and condensing into the pitch-black arrow, Noah let out a deep breath. Noah could clearly feel it. As more and more curse power and darkness condensed into the arrow gradually began to emit extremely terrifying waves of death. Under the enhancement of the Dark Night and the Invisible Island, Athena's power surpassed that of the great sage. Athena's attack with all of her curse power was definitely several times more terrifying than Susanu's attack. Therefore, the next attack would also determine the outcome of the battle. Noah's ill-fated relationship with Athena would be broken after this attack. In that case, if I don't use my strongest attack, then I don't deserve to be Athena's fated enemy, right? Noah laughed bitterly, but the expression in his eyes became extremely bright. Then there's no other way. The silver holy sword in Noah's hand shattered and turned into fragments that filled the sky. Among the fragments that filled the sky, a wave-like golden ripple rippled and slowly spat out a strange-shaped sword. Noah gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. Almost in an instant, the strangely shaped sword suddenly began to spin. Upon closer inspection, the sword that suddenly rotated was not only cylindrical, but it was also made up of 3 different cylindrical blades that were linked together. At this moment, the pitch-black cylindrical blades covered with red curse patterns spun in different directions at an extremely fast speed. Waves of red wind pressure, like a storm, rose from the cylindrical rotating blade. Chapter 1474. Wang Wang Wang. The extremely dense darkness continued to surge within the temple, as if a black ocean was rolling and gathering towards a black arrow. However, Athena, who was knocking the arrow, had a serious expression on her face. Who? Amidst the violent whistling sound, waves after waves of red wind pressure rose from the cylindrical sword like a whirlwind that continuously spiraled. Holding the cylindrical sword tightly, Noah looked like he was going to insert the spinning sword into the ground. He turned the sword upside down in front of him, the tip of the sword pointed to the ground, then he met Athena's gaze. The corner of his mouth slowly raised into a rather cold arc. You want to defeat me, goddess? Noah's voice was extremely clear amidst the violent red wind pressure. Then let's try. Let me see if the goddess of the Holy Trinity, Athena, can break through the power of this sword. As he spoke, Noah converted all the energy in his body into magic power, causing the vast magic power to surge into the noble artifact named Guile Separation Sword. Amidst the influx of magic power, the 3 cylindrical blades on Guile Separation Sword spun faster and faster. In the end, it even let out an extremely sharp and ear-piercing sound. Amidst the sharp and ear-piercing sound, the violent red wind pressure on the Guile Separation Sword became more and more intense. It had already turned into a whirlwind and covered Noah's entire body. That scene was as if Noah had become the eye of a typhoon, causing the whirlwind to madly revolve around him. However, that wind was no ordinary wind. The best evidence was that anything that was swept by the red wind pressure, be it the ground, rocks, or debris, they were all like the most fragile pieces of paper and were cleanly crushed. In the end, the only place that remained intact was the ground that Noah was standing on. From that red wind pressure, Athena felt an extremely fatal threat. That threat was even more terrifying than the death that could be directly inflicted. The wisdom of the goddess of wisdom informed Athena. That wind pressure was absolutely untouchable. However, looking at Noah, who seemed to have become the center of the violent red wind pressure and was controlling the red hurricane, Athena could clearly sense the scorching battle intent in his eyes. Her heart was boiling with excitement all of a sudden. I see. Is this your real challenge to the goddess? Driven by her boiling emotions, Athena couldn't help but shout loudly. Good. Very good. This concubine's fated enemy. Your challenge. As the queen of the gods, Athena shall accept the challenge. It was as if he was displaying his final glory. Athena raised all the curse power in her body and squandered it like it was free. Suddenly, the enormous power of the curse and the dense darkness condensed into the pitch-black arrow in an even more violent form, causing the entire world to tremble slightly and space to distort. After an unknown amount of time, the darkness and curse power that permeated the whole space slowly subsided. On the bowstring in Athena's hand, the pitch-black arrow bloomed with an extremely deep black light, causing the surrounding air to be annihilated and squeezed into nothingness little by little. The world suddenly became silent. Boom! Accompanied by a loud explosion, the pitch-black arrow turned into a huge light arrow that was hundreds of feet long and suddenly shot out. Wherever the light arrow passed, the ground seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force, causing a huge gully to be torn open and plowed the whole temple into 2 halves. The speed of the light arrow was so astonishing that people could only see a flash of light in front of their eyes. Even the sound of it breaking through the air could not be heard. The light arrow, which seemed to be able to cover the sky and the sun, heavily landed on the red hurricane amidst the tremors of the world. Boom! When the pitch-black arrow, which seemed to carry the darkness of the night sky, landed on the red hurricane, a thunder-like explosion resounded in every space of the entire invisible island. The deafening noise exploded in the temple, causing the whole temple to tremble and suddenly crack open. Then an extremely terrifying impact, like an erupting volcano, turned into a strong wave of fire and spread out in an arc. At that moment, the few remaining pillars in the divine hall shattered one after another. The ground caved in layer by layer. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Under such a terrifying impact, even Athena could only raise her longbow and block in front of her. She tried her best to stabilize her body, but her eyes were fixed in front of her. There, the pitch-black arrows of light that blotted out the sky and the red hurricane collided with each other, setting off terrifying shockwaves that spread out in all directions. Looking at this scene, Athena's face sank bit by bit. This was because the attack, which had exhausted all of Athena's divine power, was in a deadlock with the red hurricane. It was completely unable to break through the barrier of the hurricane and touch Noah, who was inside. Within the red hurricane, Noah raised his eyes and looked at Athena, whose face had sunk. His eyes flashed and he suddenly grasped the hilt of the good parting sword. Pang! The good parting sword, which was spinning at an extreme speed, suddenly trembled and caused the red hurricane to explode. As a result, the arrow of light that collided with the red hurricane was directly swallowed by the sudden expansion of the hurricane. It was ruthlessly crushed and annihilated into nothingness. Athena stood up in shock. Is this your full strength? Noah laughed out loud. Then it's my turn. As he said this, Noah suddenly raised the good parting sword in front of him and stabbed it in Athena's direction. Heaven and earth parting star, Enuma Elish. The violent red wind pressure that engulfed Noah's body suddenly turned into a terrifying tornado that swept out violently. The red tornado tore open the ground, tore open the temple, and tore open the entire space. It carried a huge pitch-black spatial fissure, and like a divine dragon, it swept towards Athena's direction with lightning speed. A terrifying wave of destruction frantically spread out from the pitch-black spatial fissure. Looking at the huge spatial fissure, as if it had cut open the heavens and earth layer by layer, and the mythical scene of the creation of the heavens and earth, Athena's beautiful snake eyes trembled violently. Her divine power had been exhausted. Her body stiffened. Her mind was blank. Her heart was wailing frantically. Athena could only watch as the red hurricane that tore the heavens and earth apart violently swept towards her with the pitch-black spatial fissure. Finally, as if she had seen through life and death, her eyes returned to indifference. Just like that, the red wind pressure engulfed Athena. Rumble! In the dark moonlit night on the terrifying rocky island, the red hurricane burst out from the temple in the center, tore open the entire temple, and penetrated through one end of the temple. The red hurricane turned into the most terrifying tornado in the world. It tore open the space, split the earth, and tore the entire invisible island into two halves. Then, it separated the sea and swept into the distance. This process caused a pitch-black spatial fissure that seemed to have existed since ancient times to appear between heaven and earth. It was as if a small part of the world had been cut open, spanning across the entire invisible island. At the edge of the invisible island, Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Kira, who were fighting against a group of dead people, were trying their best to stabilize themselves because the island had been split in half and was shaking violently. Then, looking at the pitch-black spatial fissure that spanned across the entire island as if it had opened up the heavens and earth, the girls' eyes were filled with shock and horror. The dizzy dead people suddenly looked up at the sky and roared. Then, they turned into dust and dissipated with the wind. Seeing this scene, the group of young girls understood. The outcome had been decided. Chapter 1475. In the pitch-black moonlight, the spatial fault that opened up the sky and the earth was like the Milky Way, hanging high above the seaside. That inconceivable scene immediately attracted the attention of many attentive people. Yarek, who was monitoring Lancelot's situation, looked at the mythical scene. Although his expression did not change, his palms were involuntarily clenched into fists, and his palms were already covered in sweat. That guy, how did he do it? Beside Yarek, who was pretending to be calm, Alice, who was monitoring Yarek in the form of a spirit body, was also shocked. She looked absent-mindedly at the scene that seemed to split the sky and earth, and did not recover for a long time. In the sky filled with dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Lancelot, who was riding on the back of a handsome white horse, his whole body was enduring the violent lightning strikes. He was accumulating his strength as he stared at the mythical scene by the seaside with an almost inconceivable eyesight, and muttered to himself, "Is this the true power of that man?" As he said this, Lancelot's whole body was slightly trembling. It was not because of fear. It was because of excitement. Even if it was me now, I would probably be reduced to ashes under such a blow. It's really scary, but the more I know, the more I want to fight that king who killed the god. As the purest, most original and most refined steel, the battle thirst in Lancelot's heart was something that others could not compare to. Even if he knew that the enemy's power could defeat him without any ability to fight back, the more it was so, the more the purest steel hero wanted to challenge him. Weren't the so-called heroes such existences? Just like those heroes who went on a crusade against monsters that harmed the human world, or even those who challenged dragons. Even if they knew that their opponent was a monster, a dragon, a powerful and terrifying creature that humans could not compare to, they would still face it head-on. Just to be able to find a trace of possibility in the impossible, to defeat the enemy, and achieve great things. Therefore, when Lancelot witnessed the scene that split the sky and earth apart with his own eyes, what he felt was not fear, but excitement and excitement. I really want to fight him. Unfortunately, this wish could not be realized at the moment. It seems that even the queen of the god realm was unable to defeat that terrifying god slayer. Guinevere appeared beside Lancelot without anyone noticing. Fear first appeared in his eyes, but it was soon replaced by determination. However, if that's the case, our plan can be realized. Hearing Guinevere's words, Lancelot sobered up a little. He forced himself to regain his rationality that was almost swallowed by the arrogance of the god of disobedience and nodded. We originally wanted to join forces with Athena to challenge the powerful god slayer, but Athena was unbelievably obsessed with the god slayer, so we chose to watch from the sidelines. Yes, uncle. Guinevere nodded heavily. After all, no matter who wins between Lord Noah and Lady Athena, it is a good thing for us. After learning that it was impossible to form an alliance with Athena, Guinevere immediately had a discussion with Lancelot, who was recovering his strength. In the end, both of them decided not to interfere in the battle between Noah and Athena. This was because this battle was, in fact, a rare opportunity for Guinevere and Lancelot. If Athena were to emerge victorious in this battle and kill Noah, it would naturally be the best thing for Guinevere and Lancelot, who viewed Noah as an unprecedentedly powerful enemy. However, if Noah won this battle, Guinevere and Lancelot would proceed with the next step of their plan. As the highest-level goddess of Earth, the power of the draconic serpent in Athena's body can greatly stimulate the existence of steel. Guinevere finally revealed his plan. If Lord Athena is defeated by Lord Noah, then the goddess of Earth, who is on the brink of death, will definitely channel the undying power of the draconic serpent to the greatest extent and fill this land with the essence of the earth. Guinevere closed his eyes and said as if he could feel the essence of the goddess of Earth gradually filling the land. If our master is sleeping on this island, then, stimulated by the essence of the dying snake goddess, even if he does not wake up, there will be some reaction and release a little divine aura. At that time, my beloved daughter will be able to use the power of the divine ancestor to activate the power of the spirit vision. With the help of our master's connection, we will be able to find him. Lancelot said lightly. For this, we even planned that if the person who killed the god was defeated by the queen of the heavenly realm, then we would kill the goddess of Earth. Now it seems that there is no need for that. This was the reason why Guinevere and Lancelot chose to watch this battle. Susanoo had also said that the power of the draconic serpent would stimulate the sleeping steel, so they needed to summon the great sage to eliminate the draconic serpent. Now, Guinevere and Lancelot planned to use this point to find the traces of the strongest steel that was sleeping on this land. But, my beloved daughter, even with the stimulation of the dying goddess of Earth's draconic serpent, the success rate of finding our master is very low. Lancelot pointed out the biggest flaw of this plan. After all, even if you are a god ancestor and have the powerful power of the spirit vision, the power of the spirit vision is not something that can be actively activated. Our failure rate is very high. Please don't worry about this, uncle, Guinevere said without any confusion. Guinevere used to be the goddess of earth. This sentence caused Lancelot to speak in surprise. My beloved daughter, are you going to undo the seal of the draconic serpent? The former goddess of earth gave up her immortal life and then fell into depravity. The existence that appeared after that was the god ancestor. In other words, the god ancestor was the former goddess of earth. In the body of such god ancestor, there was a draconic serpent seal. As long as the draconic serpent seal was undone, the god ancestor would take back the divinity, and divine power that she had when she was the goddess of earth, and fight against the god slayer and the god of disobedience. However, once the seal was undone, the immortal life of the god ancestor would also disappear in a short time. In other words, Guinevere was ready to give up her life in exchange for power. If we can stimulate the draconic serpent power of another goddess of earth, more of our master's divine aura will leak out, increasing the success rate of the spirit vision. Guinevere, who is the incarnation of the goddess of earth, can also use a more powerful spiritual eye to spy, increasing the success rate of finding our master. Guinevere turned her head and looked at Lancelot's hand. In addition, Uncle still has the remains of our master in his hands. Through it, Guinevere will be able to find the location of our master who is connected to her divine aura and awaken our sleeping master. Taking a closer look, in Lancelot's hand was a gun. It was a very ordinary gun. However, the tip of this very ordinary spear was a platinum-colored sharp blade. The sharp blade emitted an extremely dazzling light, exuding an extremely sharp aura. At first glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary weapon. Once, in order to awaken the last king, the previous generation of Guinevere fabricated the legend of King Arthur. That was to say, King Arthur's original form was the last king in this world. In the legends of Great Britain, the most famous symbol of King Arthur was undoubtedly the sword of Steelbreaker, which was known as the King's Sword. Since King Arthur's original form was the last king, it meant that the existence known as the last king also had a steel blade that symbolized himself. The Sword of Steel was the most powerful god relic that was integrated with the last king. It was the trump card that Wang Zhanji used to annihilate the god-slaying demon king. Every time the last king annihilated all the god-slayers on the earth and fell into a deep sleep again, the remains of the sword would be left on the land where it had once roamed. Guinevere found such remains and awakened it with a secret method, creating a replica of the sword and transforming it into a gun for Lancelot to use. Chapter 1476. Clang. The platinum blade that was made into the tip of the spear shone with a dazzling light. It was a kind of blade light that could easily make people feel intoxicated. Looking at the platinum spear tip that Lancelot held tightly in his hand, Guinevere caressed it lovingly. The sword of swords, the steel of steel, the divine sword that can even cut a star. It's called the divine sword of salvation. If the hero known as the last king was King Arthur's original form, the sharp blade called the divine sword of salvation was the original form of the divine sword of salvation. It was just like what Guinevere said. It was the divine sword of salvation that could even cut a star and kill the demon king who killed a god in one hit. It was extremely powerful. One of the most important reasons why the existence known as the last king could become the nemesis of the demon king who killed gods was that he possessed the most powerful god relic that was integrated with his body. It was equivalent to a clone of himself. Now, the tip of the divine spear that Lancelot was holding was only a defective replica made from the remains of the divine saber. Not only did it not have the terrifying power of the real divine sword of salvation, but it could only be used for a limited time. There were even conditions to use it. However, even so, it still had enough power to be Lancelot's trump card. The reason why someone as astute as Yarek had miscalculated Lancelot's strength and was heavily injured by Lancelot was largely due to the existence of this divine spear. One could only imagine how powerful the true divine blade of salvation was. Naturally, Guinevere did not use the secret method to replicate the spear just to make it Lancelot's weapon. The divine sword of salvation was a god relic that was integrated with the hero who saved the world. Meanwhile, the tip of the spear in Lancelot's hand was made from the remnant of the divine sword of salvation. In other words, the tip of the spear could be regarded as a part of the last king's body. If the last king, sleeping in this land, was stimulated by the power of the two goddess of Earth's dragons and snakes, then the last king, sleeping in this land, would have a reaction and leak some divine energy. Then, through the wreckage of that sword of salvation connected to the main body's divine energy, the possibility of finding the location of the last king would be very high with the help of the goddess of Earth's spiritual eye, which was far superior to the spirit vision. For this reason, Guinevere did not hesitate to undo the seal of the dragon snake. Pa-G! In an instant, the sound of something breaking rang out. The doll-like girl's body surged with a shocking amount of curse power. Even her body began to rapidly expand. Ka-ka-ka-ka-ka. White and silver scales began to form on Guinevere's skin like ice. Bang! The girl's black dress, which looked like a morning dress, instantly exploded. Just like that, Guinevere's entire body began to distort. Sharp claws grew out of the front ends of his limbs, and wings grew out of his back. His pitiful face turned into a cold and sharp reptilian face, but there was a sense of solemnity on his face. In that instant, Guinevere transformed into a white dragon. It was a dragon with the body of a snake, like a divine dragon, but with a pair of enormous wings. Wang! The boundless aura of Mother Earth began to spread throughout the heaven and earth. Because Athena was on the verge of death, this world was already filled with the power of dragons and serpents. Now, coupled with the aura of the Mother Earth goddess that Guinevere had transformed into, invisible waves that could not be seen directly by the naked eye suddenly expanded in this world. Clang! As if stimulated by the abundant power of dragons and serpents, the tip of the divine spear in Lancelot's hand bloomed with a more dazzling white light than before. In the white light, Guinevere's pair of snake-like eyes flashed. Although the ability known as spirit vision was only a kind of apocalypse, sometimes it could even see the future. Now, Guinevere, who had transformed into the Mother Earth goddess, relied on the spiritual eye that was purer than spirit vision to see through the remains of the divine blade of salvation. His entire mind followed the aura of the divine blade of salvation and expanded into this world. His purpose was to search for the aura of the steel hero that rose from the remains of the divine blade of salvation after being stimulated by the aura of dragons and serpents. Not long after, Guinevere's mind was suddenly pulled to a dark place. There, Guinevere saw the scene of his dreams. This made Guinevere pleasantly surprised, and he even shouted out loud, "Uncle, I found it!" At the same time, on the invisible island that was split in half by the spatial fault that separated heaven and earth, the mythical impact gradually began to subside. Without knowing when, the darkness that covered this part of the world began to fade, allowing the stars and the full moon in the sky to suddenly appear, sprinkling a soft light. A gust of wind blew past, sweeping away all the thick sand and dust that filled the center of the invisible island. As the smoke and dust dissipated, the huge temple was exposed under the moonlight. However, the temple, which was exposed under the moonlight, was in a horrible state. Large and small cracks covered the surrounding ground and walls. Stone pillars fell to the ground, either half destroyed or completely destroyed. Pieces of rubble and debris filled every corner of the building. In addition, there was a huge deep pit located in the center of the temple, like the crater of a volcano, emitting bursts of scorched smoke and a smell. As for the ceiling, it had completely disappeared, leaving only a few pieces of it. The originally vast and towering temple seemed to have been shaken by an earthquake. Nearly half of it had collapsed and directly turned into ruins. The scene made one begin to wonder if the temple ruins had been in such a state from the beginning, instead of being destroyed in less than a few minutes. Unfortunately, this was the truth. The temple that was exposed under the moonlight with a tragic appearance was destroyed in less than a few minutes. Moreover, in the temple, there was a dark spatial fault that looked like a ferocious gap that spanned across. That kind of scene was simply something that could only be found in myths. Buzz. In the slight vibration, the cylindrical rotating blade that was previously spinning at an extremely fast speed slowly stopped, allowing the red wind pressure that lingered around the blade to dissipate. Holding the relic called the Obedient Separation Sword, Noah looked in front of him speechlessly. There, the goddess who was known for her beauty and wisdom sat on the ground, her whole body intact, without a trace of injury. However, this goddess was no longer the same as before. Her whole body was fluctuating with terrifying divine power. Because of the exhaustion of her power, her body shrank from the form of a 17 or 18-year-old girl to the form of a 12 or 13-year-old girl. She clutched her chest, her face pale and tired. Seeing this, Noah was silent for a while, then sighed. As expected of the goddess who symbolizes immortality, even if the curse power in her body is exhausted, she can still be resurrected? Yes. Under the direct attack of the Obedient Separation Sword, Athena had long been smashed to pieces, leaving no trace behind. However, after that, Athena immediately came back to life. This was a very unbelievable thing. It must be known that once, Perseus was killed by Noah because his curse power was exhausted and he could no longer use the power of resurrection. Now, Athena had also exhausted her curse power, but she could still come back to life. From this, it could be seen that the goddess of earth was immortal. In this regard, Athena, who was sitting on the ground, could only laugh at herself. This is the only time. I have exhausted all my power. You don't even need to use that terrifying sword. You only need to attack me again, and I will die in your hands. Athena's eyes were filled with satisfaction as she spoke. What a beautiful sword strike. You are this concubine's destined enemy. That sword strike buried this concubine, causing this concubine to lose a life. It also calmed the surging passion in this concubine's heart for you. To end with such an impeccable sword, even I have no reason to not be satisfied. Athena raised her head, looked at Noah, and said word by word, "Give this concubine the final blow." Chapter 1477. Give this concubine the final blow. When Athena's words echoed in the surrounding space, the atmosphere of the entire world became heavy. Noah looked at Athena, who was sitting on the ground and clutching her chest. Her face was pale and exhausted, and his dark eyes flickered. In the end, Noah sighed and raised the parting sword above his head. Athena slowly closed her eyes. Just when Athena thought that Noah was going to give her the final blow, Noah raised the sword above his head and let it float in the air. A golden ripple suddenly appeared and swallowed the good separation sword. Then it disappeared from the space. After that, Noah stepped forward and knelt on one knee in front of Athena, who was paralyzed on the ground. Athena, who didn't receive the final blow, frowned slightly and opened her eyes, allowing Noah's figure to enter her vision. A pair of deep, pitch-black eyes met with a pair of incomparably coquettish snake eyes, causing their gazes to converge. Athena did not avoid Noah's gaze. She frowned and said expressionlessly, "What? You don't want to kill me?" "That's not quite right." Noah didn't look away either. He stared straight into Athena's coquettish snake eyes. "I've just killed you," said Lin Yun. "But I resurrected." Athena retorted. "Then there's no point." "But?" Noah asked indifferently. "I've already made a killing move with the intention of killing you and completely defeated you. I've already achieved my goal, so why do you say that it's meaningless?" "So you really don't want to kill me?" Athena frowned. Killing me will give you a new authority, right? Could it be that you've already forgotten what I said to you in Nabali last time? Noah said with a chuckle. My authority is enough for me to use. Even now, I still have the potential to greatly increase my power. 1 or 2 more authority won't be of much help to me. After saying that, Noah shrugged and said so. Or do you think that after killing you, I'll be able to usurp a power that's more powerful than the Genesis attack just now? Athena was suddenly speechless. Even as the goddess of wisdom, Athena did not dare to tell Noah that after killing her, he would be able to usurp an authority that was comparable to the power of the Good Departure Sword, The Good Departure Sword, was an X-ranked relic. It was one of the strongest relics in Noah's treasury. Its power was definitely more than 99% of an authority. Since he had such power, 1 or 2 more authority wouldn't matter to Noah, right? Moreover, I also have the Aegis, Noah said. If after killing you, the authority I usurp is the Aegis, then it's even more useless to me, right? Athena, who was provoked by Noah's words, suddenly stared at Noah. Then what do you want? Hearing this, Noah curled his lips and smiled. Isn't this obvious? Saying this, Noah looked straight at Athena and extended a hand in her direction. Fulfill the promise you made to me in Nabali and stay by my side. Athena's expression suddenly froze. Back then, when they were in Nabali, Noah and Athena did have an agreement. If, in the future, the winner was Athena, then Noah would be at Athena's disposal. If, in the future, the winner was Noah, then Athena would have to be like Lancelot and protect Noah forever as a guardian. Now, Noah wanted Athena to fulfill the promise. This caused the light in Athena's eyes to sway slightly. After a while, she suddenly smiled. A mere human actually wants to obtain Athena's body and mind. Don't you think that's too greedy? What does it matter? Noah said somewhat unhappily. I also spent a lot of effort to defeat the Trinity Queen of the heavenly realm. Is it wrong to be a little greedy? Humans are indeed a group of arrogant and ignorant people, even you are no exception. Athena said sarcastically, but there was not much disgust on her pretty face. Instead, there was an aloof smile. However, you're right. There's no reason for the man who defeated me to not even have the guts to ask for such a small amount of spoils. As the loser, I can only follow the rules of the battlefield and listen to the orders of the victor. After saying this, Athena extended a hand and placed it on Noah's hand. Whether it is in the past, present, or future, this is probably the only time I am willing to serve a human. Noah Dole, feel honored to be favored by Athena. Hearing the proud declaration of the goddess known for her beauty and wisdom, Noah could not help but smile. God and God Slayer. They were supposed to be enemies, but at this moment, they were holding each other's hands tightly. At this moment, they had formed a lifelong bond and connection. At this moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. Kaboom! Along with the thunderous roar, the originally clear night sky was suddenly stirred up by the wind and clouds, completely disrupted. Noah and Athena both raised their heads and looked at the sky. Athena's pretty face immediately changed. Not good. Time rewound to a few minutes ago. This place was higher than the clouds, even far above the atmosphere. People called this area the orbit of the satellite, the domain of the universe. The environment here was very harsh. Depending on the sunlight, the temperature here would change from extreme cold to extreme heat. In this place, humans could not survive without the help of tools. However, in this high altitude that was connected to the universe, there was a small island. A small island. There were hills and flat land, but there were no plants or life. There was only soil and rocks on this small island. Such a small island was suspended high in the sky where no one could reach. In the center of this island, on the ground, there was a sword inserted upside down. It was a steel sword with a blade length of nearly 100 centimeters, with both sides open. The blade on both sides was long and wide, and the structure was very thick. In terms of appearance alone, this sword was exactly the same as Noah's Excalibur. However, unlike the Excalibur that shone with a golden radiance, The sword in front of him was mottled with rust, and there was nothing that could attract his attention. However, in this world, this sword was the prototype of the Excalibur. It was called the Sword of Salvation. It was the strongest sword worn by the hero who annihilated the Demon King. At a certain moment, a bolt of lightning violently swept from the planet below and landed on the small island. Boom! Accompanied by a roar, the ground that was hit by the lightning suddenly burst open, and a thick cloud of smoke and dust rose. It didn't take long for the smoke and dust to slowly dissipate. Inside, two figures walked out. Looking at the mottled rusty steel sword, Guinevere, who had transformed into a white dragon, could not help but murmur with some excitement. "Master, Guinevere has finally found you." Compared to Guinevere, Lancelot seemed to be much more indifferent. "My beloved daughter, my master seems to be still lazy. While your life is still there, hurry and wake up the lazy master." "Got it, uncle." Only then did Guinevere suppress the excitement in his heart and circled his slender body around the steel sword. The mottled sword suddenly vibrated and suddenly bloomed with star-like light. Boom! At this moment, the wind and clouds suddenly surged in the world below, and thunder rumbled. Chapter 1478. A light as bright as the sun bloomed on the mottled and rusted steel sword, instantly filling the entire space. Guinevere, who had transformed into a white dragon, seemed to intend to use his body to support the shining steel sword. His body circled the space around the steel sword, while his head hung down from top to bottom, and a cute voice that was completely different from his appearance sounded. "We pray for the sword's rebirth, cut through the darkness of the apocalypse, and kill the demon king who slays the gods." The sacred voice resounded over the entire island, causing the divine sword of salvation to tremble repeatedly, and the brilliance that bloomed on it became more and more dazzling. "The incomparably noble sword of swords, the blade of blades, the steel of steel, you are the blade that annihilates the demon king, you are the pure white light of salvation, born to kill the Rakshasa of the world. Respond to the call of your former ally, and return to this world." Guinevere, who was chanting, suddenly opened his huge dragon mouth and spat out a bolt of lightning. The dazzling lightning suddenly struck the mottled and rusted steel sword, causing the platinum brilliance to tremble violently. Like a vortex of light, it converged into the divine sword of salvation. The light faded away. However, the steel sword that was inserted into the ground had completely changed. One could only see a dazzling arc of light slowly flowing on the platinum sword, causing the sharp blade to shine with a dazzling luster. The originally mottled and rusted steel sword no longer existed. In its place was a platinum divine sword that shone with a dazzling light, and the blade seemed to be the most dazzling weapon in the world. The sword was so dazzling that it made people involuntarily absent-minded. However, neither Guinevere nor Lancelot shifted their gaze to the platinum divine sword, but slightly shifted their gaze to the space near the divine sword. At some point in time, a silhouette had appeared there. It was a young man with pale white hair. The young man's back was facing Guinevere and Lancelot, so they couldn't see his appearance clearly, but his back revealed a sense of vicissitudes. He wore a very simple blue windbreaker and trousers, and a white coat that resembled a cape on the outside. The young man seemed to have been there since the beginning. He stood against the wind, with his back to Guinevere and Lancelot, standing beside the divine sword. Looking at the figure, Guinevere could no longer hide his excitement and shouted out loud. "Master, Guinevere has finally completed her mission and awakened you." Hearing this, the youth who was standing against the wind slowly raised his head and turned around, revealing his handsome face to the snake goddess and the steel hero. However, on that upright and beautiful face, there was an indelible weariness. While looking at the excited Guinevere, there was a trace of complicated emotions in his eyes. That gaze was as if he was looking at a meddlesome person. Even if it wasn't filled with disgust, there was still a heavy sense of sorrow. However, that gaze disappeared in an instant. "I never thought that I would be able to see you all again. This is great." The young man's voice actually contained a kind of gentle feeling that made people feel comfortable. At this moment, this voice only expressed the joy of reunion. In the past, the hero who was known as the last king and had the mission to annihilate the demon king had appeared several times, wandering the earth and conquering the god slayers. During this process, the hero met many like-minded gods of disobedience who had also appeared on the ground and wandered aimlessly. Among them was Lancelot, and also Guinevere when she was still the goddess of earth. Therefore, for the hero, Guinevere and Lancelot were old friends of the past. In this regard, Lancelot just nodded and said so. I am also deeply happy to be able to fight side by side with you again. And because Guinevere gave up her immortal life and fell to become a god ancestor, now, she had long lost the memories of fighting side by side with the hero, and only respect and love for the master she was pursuing. Now that you have awakened, Guinevere's existence is meaningful. For a long time, Guinevere had been pursuing the last king, using the identity of the last king's servant to disturb the order of the world. Her goal was to awaken the last king, whom she called her master. Now, this goal was finally achieved. Then, Guinevere's existence was meaningful. Understanding this, the hero looked at Guinevere, who had turned into a white dragon, with eyes full of sorrow. Your life is almost at its end, right? Yes, master, Guinevere said in a pious tone. So, please let Guinevere use this life that is about to fade away to replace the lost Holy Grail, so that you can recover completely. In the past, every time the hero completed the mission to annihilate all the demon kings on the earth, this hero would fall into a deep sleep, silently waiting for the birth of a new demon king, and the battle would repeat over and over again. In the long sleep, the hero would gradually lose his power, and when he woke up, he would be in a state where he had no power at all. Because of this, every time he woke up, the hero had to wander the earth. It was said before that the hero of steel was the natural enemy of the goddess of snakes, born with the power to slay dragons and kill snakes. And the goddess of snakes was the goddess of earth. Because of this, the hero of steel was able to extract essence from the earth. For example, the great sage, Heaven's equal, had once merged with a mountain to extract the essence of the earth to recover from his injuries. The hero, as the strongest hero of steel, had an unparalleled authority in this aspect. He did not need to painstakingly extract the essence of the earth like the great sage, spending a few days to gather enough energy to recover from his injuries. The hero only needed to step on the earth, and his body would naturally extract the essence of the earth. Moreover, the speed was extremely fast. Therefore, the hero had to wander the earth because he needed to gather the essence of the earth to recover his lost power. In order to restore the hero to a perfect state after he woke up, Guinevere did not hesitate to sacrifice his immortal life to create the Holy Grail. The function of the Holy Grail was to store the essence of the earth. With the help of the Holy Grail, the hero would be able to recover immediately after he woke up. However, now that the Holy Grail had been taken away by Noah, there was no way to use this function. Therefore, what Guinevere could do was to transform the life of the Gaia goddess, which was about to disappear, into pure essence of the earth to restore the hero to a perfect state. This way, Master can destroy that terrifying god slayer. Guinevere looked at the hero with a trace of nostalgia. Then, without any hesitation, he controlled his white dragon-like body and flew into the air. Bang! In the next second, Guinevere's huge body exploded. This god ancestor who had repeatedly schemed against Noah and caused him a lot of trouble in the dark had finally died. However, the body of this god ancestor did not turn into minced meat or blood. Instead, it turned into a golden mist that poured down and sprinkled on the body of the last king. The body of the hero, who was known as the last king, naturally absorbed the golden mist that sprinkled down. Then, a huge spell began to slowly rise from the hero's body. Finally, it turned into a violent storm that blew across the entire island. In the storm, a figure gradually appeared. It was a strange man with bandages all over his body and a mask on his face. The strange man appeared from the raging storm and landed next to the hero. The hero looked at the strange man as if he was looking at a close friend. He smiled with a sad expression. "It's good that you're here." After this short sentence, the hero didn't say anything else. The reason was simple. Before Lancelot had even appeared on the ground, this strange man with bandages all over his body had already been by Hero's side, working for him. The hero trusted this god even more than Lancelot. "My lord, it's time to conquer the enemy," Lancelot suddenly said. "There is an extremely powerful god slayer in the lower realm who is waiting for your arrival." The hero silently lowered his head and did not speak. However, he reached out his hand and slowly grasped the platinum divine blade. The hero who annihilated the Demon King had finally arrived. Chapter 1479. Rumble. Under the dark night, the entire sky surged as if it was welcoming the most terrifying storm. Lightning flashed and thunder roared back and forth between the dark clouds, and the storm was getting more and more intense. At this moment, the sky seemed to be constantly stirred by an invisible hand. The dark clouds rotated like a vortex, causing the air to become chaotic. This scene could be best described as a change in heaven and earth. Looking at the chaotic sky, both Noah and Athena felt an extremely unusual sense of oppression. It was the precursor of a storm. "What's going on?" Noah said with some surprise. "Could it be that Lancelot and Guinevere are up to something again?" "No, it's not." Athena shook her head and murmured with a dignified expression. "It's that man. That man finally woke up." "That man?" Noah was startled at first, then his heart skipped a beat. "The last king?" Athena nodded her head in silence, but her expression was somewhat displeased. "Looks like that servant girl used some kind of method to find the place where that man was hibernating and woke him up. This concubine originally thought that they would come and disturb the duel between you and me, so I specially made some arrangements. Who would have thought that the servant girl would wake up that taboo steal?" Like Noah, Athena also made some countermeasures to prevent Guinevere and Lancelot from disrupting the duel. No wonder she was called the goddess of wisdom. It was a pity that Guinevere and Lancelot only wanted to sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight while reaping the benefits. They did not disturb the duel halfway. Otherwise, with Noah and Athena's arrangements, the two god ancestors and the hero would really be in trouble. However, it was a little too late to say this now. Guinevere and Lancelot did not come personally to disrupt the duel, but used some unorthodox methods to find the location of the last king. After understanding this, Noah opened his mouth slightly. Just as he was about to ask something, Athena suddenly raised her head and yelled, "You're going to kill me." "They're here." Almost as soon as Athena's voice trailed off, a bolt of lightning shot down from the disorderly clouds in the sky. It tore through the sky and bombarded the top of the half-destroyed temple. Bang! The lightning struck the ceiling of the temple, causing a loud boom and a burst of electric arcs. It even set off a strong wind that blew in all directions. Noah and Athena subconsciously raised their hands in front of their faces to block the violent wind. Then, they quickly raised their eyes and looked at the top of the temple. There, 3 people appeared. One was an armored hero riding on a handsome white horse. One of them was a strange man with bandages all over his body and a mask on his face. The other young man stood between the armored hero and the masked man. His windbreaker fluttered in the wind, and he held a platinum blade tightly in his hand. Both Noah and Athena's eyes trembled. Without any hesitation, they looked directly at the young man holding the platinum blade. Then, under the gaze of Noah and Athena, the young man's windbreaker fluttered in the wind, and an extremely terrifying fluctuation of curse powers surged from his body. Hum! The space trembled in an instant. The terrifying curse power transformed into a substantial flame that burned on the young man's body. In the blink of an eye, he had surpassed Lancelot and the masked, eccentric man. Moreover, it was still rising at an extremely fast speed. Feeling the terrifying curse power, Noah's pupils suddenly shrank, and he exclaimed, "No, no way." Noah couldn't help but be surprised. In this world, Noah could be considered to have encountered many powerful disobedient gods. Among them, there was no lack of gods like Welslana, Mercato, Perseus, Susanu, the Monkey King, and Athena, who were the highest-ranking gods among the gods. Among these gods, if Noah had to pick the most powerful one, it would undoubtedly be Athena, who had been strengthened by the dark night and the invisible island. After being strengthened by the dark night and the invisible island, Athena's power had surpassed the rest of the highest-ranking disobedient gods in all aspects. Therefore, in the face of Athena's attack, Noah had to use the strongest X-level relic. Of course, in terms of power alone, Athena was not the strongest among the disobedient gods that Noah had encountered. After all, the great sage, Heaven's equal, had once used the blessing of the ancient covenant to gain a great increase in power when facing multiple god-slayers. He had suddenly surpassed all the disobedient gods and reached the top 4 digits of the box court. If it was the Monkey King who had used the power of the ancient covenant, then even Athena, who had been strengthened by the dark night and the invisible island, would be weaker. However, at this moment, the power of the boy with the platinum blade had easily surpassed all the above gods. If Athena's power, which had been strengthened by the dark night and the invisible island, was 10, and the Monkey King's power, which had been strengthened by the ancient covenant, was 30, then the boy's power had broken through 70, 80, and even 90, and finally broke through the 100 barrier. And that was not the limit. The young man's power was still rising. The Monkey King's power, which had been strengthened by the ancient covenant, was comparable to the 4-digit level of the top gods. Therefore, the boy who had surpassed the Monkey King by several times, or even dozens of times, had undoubtedly reached the 3-digit level. Impressively, he was no weaker than Aziz Dakaha. How could Noah not be surprised? The boy slowly raised the platinum blade in his hand under Noah's astonished gaze. Clang! In an instant, a brilliant platinum brilliance rose from the blade, illuminating the entire night. Then, pointing high into the sky, on the tip of the divine blade, which was blooming with brilliant light, a platinum ball of light slowly rotated in the distant sky, condensing and blooming with brilliant light. As the platinum ball of light grew bigger, the light from it grew stronger and stronger. Finally, it was as bright as the sun, making the whole night as bright as day. Seeing such a scene, Noah's heart was filled with a sense of alarm. Under such circumstances, the young man who was holding the dazzling platinum blade did not say a word. He just looked down at Noah condescendingly. There was no joy or sorrow in his eyes, only intense fatigue and numbness. Then, in front of Noah, the young man swung the divine saber in his hand heavily. In the sky, the white gold sun suddenly trembled and fell straight down. It rubbed against the air and stirred up a wave of fiery red heat. With a speed that was not inferior to lightning, it fell from the sky and abruptly landed on the invisible island. Boom! An earth-shattering noise resounded through the sky. The platinum sun directly hit the island above the ocean, and it exploded, causing the Banshee Island that originally only existed in myths to be shrouded in the explosion in an instant. In the flash of the explosion, the ground of the invisible island was destroyed inch by inch. The trees were shattered one by one, and the rocks and debris were annihilated little by little. Everything seemed to have been melted by the scorching heat, disappearing without a trace. Boom! With the invisible island as the center, a circle of terrifying shock waves spread out in a ring shape, setting off a layer of tsunami-like waves. Together with the shock waves, it surged out in all directions. That scene was as if a small star had really hit the ocean, causing a terrifying commotion. No one knew how long that apocalyptic scene lasted, and no one would calculate how long it lasted. However, when the terrifying shockwave and explosive flashes gradually subsided, the famous island of the snake-haired demoness Medusa had long since disappeared. What was left was only a strait to the bottom of the sea, where one could vaguely see the surface of the sea. There, a deep pit was dug out, as if a meteorite had penetrated the earth and led to the earth's core. It was bottomless. Chapter 1480. Whoosh! In the loud sound of a waterfall falling vertically in the ocean, A large amount of seawater followed the natural law of flowing downwards and poured into the deep pit that seemed to lead straight to the core of the earth, forming a rather peculiar sea scene. The hero holding the blade of salvation, the knight riding on the white horse, and the strange man in the whirlwind were all suspended in midair, looking down at the strange sea scene below without any fluctuations in their eyes. After all, the same scene had been seen many times in previous expeditions, so it was not surprising at all. As expected of the real blade of salvation, its power is indeed unparalleled. Lancelot only raised the divine spear in his hand with some admiration and some regret. In front of the real power of the blade of salvation, such a replica is not worth mentioning. As Lancelot's words sounded, the brilliance on the tip of the divine spear in his hand became extremely dim, and even began to become mottled and rusty. After all, a replica was just a replica. Under the real power of the blade of salvation, the tip of the divine spear in Lancelot's hand seemed to feel inferior and lost its brilliance little by little, and silently collapsed, turning into powder and dissipating along with the body of the spear. In front of the real thing, the replica could only be reduced to the result of dejectedly leaving the scene. However, it was originally used as a medium to find the last king. Therefore, Lancelot did not feel pity for the divine spear at all, but said with some regret, "At first, I wanted to use this spear to fight against the abnormally powerful God-slayer, but now it seems that I can't fulfill this small wish." The divine spear had died of old age. The God-slayer, who was regarded as a great enemy by Guinevere and Lancelot, was also eliminated under the brilliance of the blade of salvation. Lancelot's heart that was eager to fight Noah could only helplessly calm down. However, at this time, the hero shook his head. "No, the God-slayer is not dead yet. I can feel that the power in my body is not declining, which proves that the number of God-slayers in the world today has not decreased." Lancelot was surprised at first, but then he said in amazement, "To be able to survive under the direct attack of the blade of salvation, as expected of the demon king who repeatedly forced me and my beloved daughter into a desperate situation. The so-called God-slayer is such a person. No matter how unfavorable the situation is, he can find a good opportunity to win. No matter how dangerous the situation is, he can find a way to survive." The hero praised in a sincere tone. An existence capable of killing gods as a human, how could such a level cause them to lose their lives? If that's the case, isn't the hero who has destroyed so many god-slayers since ancient times to the present? Lancelot suddenly smiled. "I also admire your martial prowess. That's why I joined you and served you as my master." Hearing this, the hero didn't show any pride or joy on his face. Instead, he revealed a sad expression. Seeing this, Lancelot's Lancelot. After a while, the knight on his horse spoke with a tone. Are you really tired of fighting?" Lancelot's words made the hero who annihilated the demon king smile tiredly. Tired? The hero, who was given the mission of annihilating the demon king by the gods, had long been tired of the repeated slumber and awakening. Once he woke up, he would have to fight. Therefore, after being awakened by Guinevere, the hero looked at the god ancestor as if he was a busybody. If it wasn't because he was tired of fighting, why would this hero, who would awaken every time multiple god-slayers appeared in the world, still be in a deep slumber when there were 7 god-slayers in the world? If the hero really wanted to fight, he would have woken up at a much earlier time. Why would he need Guinevere's busybody to wake him up? However, this matter was very inconceivable. The so-called Steel was a living god of sword, god of war, and god of war. The purer the steel was, the more he yearned for fierce battles. The hero who was the strongest steel was actually tired of fighting. It was really inconceivable. Therefore, Guinevere did not think that the hero was still in a deep slumber because he did not want to wake up. It was not because he had not yet awakened and needed her to wake up the last king. However, Lancelot could easily see through his master's inner thoughts. Lancelot even knew why the Steel, who was supposed to be extremely battle-thirsty, would be so inconceivably tired of fighting. Thinking of this, Lancelot raised his eyes slightly and looked behind the hero. Upon closer inspection, there was an extremely difficult to detect black shadow hovering there like a whirlpool. Glancing at the black shadow, Lancelot said helplessly, "If that's the case, you won't take the initiative to chase after the God Slayer, right?" The hero shook his head and his tone became unusually firm. "Although I am tired of the constant battles, since I have woken up, I have to fight the God Slayer to determine the winner." Saying this, the hero turned his head and looked in the direction of the land with a sorrowful gaze. "Otherwise, this world will be destroyed because of me." As far as the hero's eyes could see, on the shore closest to the ocean, a strange phenomenon suddenly occurred. It was as if the earth had suddenly lost its moisture and slowly dried up. All the flowers and plants turned yellow. The trees became dry and withered bit by bit. In the blink of an eye, as far as the hero's eyes could see, the earth became lifeless and the area was constantly expanding. If this continued, sooner or later, the entire island and even the entire world would become a barren land of death. Understanding this, the existence known as the last king to appear in the apocalypse smiled sadly. "That's right, I must kill those god slayers and go back to sleep as soon as possible." Lancelot and the masked man suddenly became silent. An oppressive atmosphere pervaded the entire world. At the same time, on the outskirts of the city some distance away from the sea, a pitch-black swamp-like darkness suddenly appeared. In the darkness, Noah and Athena stumbled out of the darkness. As soon as they appeared, Athena immediately covered her chest and fell to the ground with a painful expression. Noah was shocked and quickly went forward, hugged Athena, and knelt on the ground with one knee. "Are you okay?" Hearing Noah's words, although Athena's face was still pale, she was unwilling to admit defeat and squeezed out a voice. "Who do you think I am? How can this level of strength kill an immortal goddess?" When the hero swung the powerful sword of salvation and released a white gold sun, directly attacking the invisible island, Noah directly carried Athena and jumped into the spatial fault opened by the sword of good departure, to avoid the terrifying attack. Then, Athena immediately used her own life as the price to bring Noah out of the spatial fault. As the god of the underworld, Athena originally had the power to freely travel between the human world and the underworld. Using this power, Athena, who had exhausted her divine power and sacrificed her life force, forcefully opened the door to the human world and escaped with Noah. If it were not for Athena, it would not be easy for Noah to return to the ground. However, Athena, who used up her life force, was a little dangerous. "Bear with it for a while." Noah slightly hugged Athena. "I will immediately heal you." In Noah's treasure vault, there were as many items that could restore curse power and life force as there were stars in the sky. It should not be difficult to use these items to restore Athena to her peak. However, Athena seemed to have seen through Noah's thoughts. She held her chest and shook her head with a painful expression. "There is no need to do unnecessary healing. Even if you restore my life force, it will not be long before my life force will immediately disappear." The unexpected bad news caused Noah to be stunned on the spot. Life force will disappear immediately? Then why? Chapter 1481. Once, in Nabali, Guinevere had used the aura of fire and wind to heal the injuries of Perseus, the god of steel. This was because fire and wind were closely related to the attributes of steel. Wind could make fire burn even more vigorously. Fire could smelt iron ore and forge a sword of steel. As the living god of swords, the heroes of steel naturally had a deep relationship with the wind and fire that smelted the sword of steel. This characteristic was used to the extreme by the heroes of steel, who were the strongest of the heroes of steel. As long as the heroes of steel appeared on the ground, they would be able to increase the aura of fire and wind, causing the ocean and the earth to continue to warm up. Through this method, the heroes could extract the essence of the earth to the greatest extent, conquering the ocean and the earth. Therefore, as long as the last king existed on the ground, the world's oceans and the earth would continue to warm up. In the end, the earth would completely dry up, the oceans would evaporate, and even the volcanoes would erupt one after another, causing the world to fall into destruction. The reason why the heroes of steel would be the last king in the world, other than the fact that they would only appear in the post-apocalyptic era when there were multiple god-slayers, the most important reason was that they themselves would bring about the real end of the world. And in order to summon the island of the snake demon, which used to belong to my clone, to this world, I have already intertwined my own life force with this land. Athena closed her eyes, as if she was feeling the remaining life force in her body, and said without a trace of emotion, "Since that man is conquering this land and extracting the essence of the earth, then my life force will naturally be extracted along with it. Even if you restore my life force, it will only delay it for a while. If that's the case, then you should cut off your connection with the earth." Noah frowned. "Or is there a reason why I can't do it?" "Exactly," Athena said faintly. "The reason why I intertwined my life force with the earth is to summon the island that belongs to me. The invisible island will act as a medium for the intertwining. If the island is still there, then I can cut off the connection at any time." Athena looked at Noah. "Now that the island has been destroyed, it will take a lot of time to cut off the connection with the earth. By that time, this land will have been conquered by the heroes. Even if I still have some life force left, I will die along with this land." Hearing this, Noah's frown deepened. "Is there no way to stop this from happening? If you want to stop it, it's not that difficult. You just have to stop that man from extracting the essence of the earth. In other words, you have to stop that man from causing the end of the world," Athena said in a magnanimous tone, as though she wasn't talking about her own affairs. And to stop the end of the world, there are only two ways. 1. The hero who annihilates the demon king has completed his mission and slays all the god-slayers who rule the world. After completing this mission, the hero would return to the appearance of the divine blade and continue to hibernate, allowing the world to return to peace. 2. Defeat the hero who destroyed the demon king. As long as he could defeat the hero would turn back into a divine blade and go back to sleep. However, in this case, the hibernation was temporary. Heroes who were known as steel had immortality similar to that of an indestructible body. The hero's undying nature was even greater than the authority of the undying bodies. As mentioned before, when a hero awakens from a long slumber, he will lose all of his strength. In this state, even the hero who annihilated the demon king was relatively weak. Could it be that the hero did not encounter any enemies before he recovered his strength? The answer was naturally no. In fact, the last king was not undefeated. On the contrary, the hero had lost to the god-slayers many times since ancient times. However, even if he was killed, it would take a few months to a few years. Sooner or later, the hero would wake up again. It was precisely because of this that this hero was able to continue fighting without stopping. However, if the God-Slayer's power was fully restored, then there was almost no God-Slayer who had the ability to defeat the hero. Because when he fully recovers, that man will be able to wield the privilege of annihilating the demon king. Athena looked up at Noah. "You should have guessed that the man had such means, right?" Noah nodded helplessly. When dealing with the great sage, heaven's equal, the great sage had used the ancient oath of allegiance to increase his strength when dealing with multiple god-slayers. That ancient covenant was made by the gods to annihilate the demon king. The great sage, heaven's equal, claimed that this was a power that only a very small number of great heroes of the steel could wield. Since that was the case, as the hero who annihilated the demon king, how could the last king not have this authority? Noah had already guessed that the last king would definitely be able to use the ancient covenant to buff him. However, don't compare the power that the monkey imitated with the real covenant. Athena stated a shocking fact. The real covenant used to annihilate the demon king is not only effective against multiple god-slayers. The hero who can wield the real ancient covenant, as long as there is more than one demon king in the world, will be able to wield it in proportion to the number of people. As long as there is more than one demon king in the world, the hero can wield the covenant. Noah was shocked. Moreover, the amount of increase is proportional to the number of people. Doesn't that mean that as long as there is not only one God-slayer left in the world, then the hero can always wield the blessing of the ancient covenant? Moreover, if the amount of increase is proportional to the number of people, then that means that the more God-slayers there are, the more power the hero can wield from the ancient covenant will be. The reason why the hero's power had such a terrifying and explosive increase, even reaching the 3 digits of Hakeda's level, was because of this? Noah smiled bitterly. I never thought that I would actually meet a powerful enemy that is on par with that lizard. In terms of power, the hero and the 3-headed dragon who were greatly enhanced by the ancient covenant were both in the 3 digits. Moreover, if it was the 3-headed dragon, he wouldn't die unless he solved the mystery of the final trial of a human. The hero's words were even more exaggerated. Until now, he had not truly died, and every time he was defeated, he could be revived. That was simply unsolvable, was it not? That is why I said that even you will become a ghost under that man's sword. Athena smiled helplessly. Now, do you still want to refute my words? Noah was speechless. If the hero was really so difficult to deal with, then indeed, even Noah did not know what to do. Thinking of this, Noah could not help but feel anxious. Is there really no way to stop Athena's death? Could it be that he had to watch this goddess who had too much of an ill-fated relationship with him return to a legend? Athena clearly saw the anxiety in Noah's eyes. Her beautiful snake eyes flickered a few times, and after a moment of silence, she sighed. You are really a strange man. You are actually so worried about your old enemy. I really don't know if I should praise you for being tolerant of your enemy, or condemn you for being seduced by a woman. Saying this, lying in Noah's arms, Athena stretched out her slender arms and wrapped them around Noah's neck, looking straight into his eyes. The reason why humans are afraid of losing their lives is because their lives are limited, so they fear death. For the gods who have unlimited lives, death is not something to be afraid of. I am the goddess who represents immortality, so I should be more open-minded and face death directly. Otherwise, how can I be qualified to be called a goddess? Athena smiled sweetly. So, using this method to escape the fate of death is simply adding a stain to my name. However, I don't want to see you sad and cowardly. There is really no other way. After saying this, Athena suddenly put her face close to Noah's face and lightly kissed his lips. Chapter 1482. The sudden kiss caused Noah to freeze completely in place. Looking at Athena's beautiful face, Noah's eyes widened slightly. In fact, this was not the first time Noah and Athena had kissed. When they were in Nabali, in order to heal Athena, who was seriously injured by Perseus, Noah had also kissed her and used the power of the priest avatar to protect Athena. However, at that time, Noah only wanted to heal Athena and did not have any other thoughts. This time, under Athena's surprise attack, although Noah's mind went blank for a moment, he was completely attracted by the soft touch on his lips. Under such circumstances, Athena boldly took the initiative to extend her pink tongue into Noah's mouth and entangled it with Noah's tongue. The taste of their lips and tongues intertwined was self-evident. Noah was also in a passive state after being ambushed by Athena. The pleasure brought by Athena's kiss made him go in circles. Undoubtedly, Noah had always said that as an eternal virgin goddess, Athena's body and mind could not be captured by a mortal, let alone a god. However, she was so bold when kissing him that Noah subconsciously held his breath. But then Athena's voice sounded in Noah's heart. I know that you also have the power of the draconic serpent in your power. The constitution of the god slayer could reflect all spells except for those that were effective on the gods, whether it was beneficial or not. However, if the spell was directly injected into the body of the god slayer through kissing, then even if the spell was not effective on the gods, it would still be effective. Now, Athena was injecting her power into Noah's body through kissing, directly communicating with Noah's mind. The power of dragons and serpents that Athena mentioned was probably referring to the incarnation of the dragon emperor. Maintaining the passionate kiss with Noah, Athena spoke in his mind while tangling with Noah's lips. I am the goddess of snakes. Since I am a snake, There will be times when I enter hibernation. Snakes sleep in the winter and awaken in the spring. This characteristic is why snakes are the symbol of immortality. Athena's body began to emit a faint light. Now, I will resonate with the draconic serpent force in your body. I will abandon my current life form and merge with your body, sharing a life with you. This way, I will be able to completely sever my connection with the earth and enter a state of suspended animation like a hibernating snake. Athena's body began to disintegrate into faint particles of light. If you can really defeat that man, I will give you a surprise when the time comes. However, if even you fail, I will accompany you to the underworld and welcome death. The girl who slowly disintegrated into light particles was like a burst of starlight, gathering around Noah and merging into his body. My nemesis, live on. Even that brave warrior will be able to overcome you. If you die in the hands of someone other than me, even if I reach the underworld, I will not let you go. Leaving such a sentence, Athena's figure completely disintegrated into light particles, merging into Noah's body and disappearing. At the same time, in the depths of Noah's heart, on the outline of the stone plate connected to the 10 patterns, the pattern representing the incarnation of the Dragon Emperor flashed. A ray of light in the shape of a snake seemed to wrap around the pattern of the Dragon Emperor. Then, like a snake that had fallen into hibernation, there was no more movement. Only then did Noah realize what was going on. However, the body temperature of the girl in his arms had long disappeared, leaving Noah alone kneeling on the ground with one knee facing the wind, looking into the distance. Stroking his heart and feeling the weak life of the goddess, Noah could not help but smile helplessly. It seems that no matter what, I have to defeat that unbeatable brave warrior. Be it in terms of strength or difficulty, the hero with the divine blade of salvation was not inferior to Aziz Dakar. But I don't intend to compromise even with Az Dakaha. Noah clenched his fist. This time, I will definitely not lose miserably like the last time. After making up his mind, Noah looked into the distance again, then resolutely turned around and walked towards the city. It was late at night when he went to fight with Athena. After the duel with Athena and witnessing the power of the last king, Noah, who was walking towards the hotel, glanced at the sky and estimated the current time. It should be around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. There is still some time before dawn. The brave warrior who annihilated the demon king had awakened. Then, according to the mission, the brave warrior should soon start a war with the current world's godslayers. And the first people to bear the brunt of the attack were naturally Noah and Yarek, who were closest to the last king. Since the last king can increase his power according to the number of godslayers in this world, it will be easy for him to determine whether I am dead or not. After all, the ancient covenant of the brave warrior increased his power according to the number of godslayers. Once a godslayer died, the power of the brave warrior would decrease. Since Noah was not dead, the power of the brave warrior would naturally not decrease. And as long as his power did not decrease, the brave warrior would definitely know that Noah was not dead. I just don't know if the brave warrior will take the initiative to come to me. Noah thought silently. I hope before dawn he won't find me. After dawn, Noah's authority would be able to completely adapt to this world. At that time, Noah, who could use his authority, would have a chance of winning against the last king. Without being able to use his authority, Noah would definitely not be a match for the last king who had gained the power of 7 godslayers. Therefore, Noah must wait until dawn. As long as he waited until dawn, Noah would personally meet the king of the apocalypse without the need for the brave warrior to come to him. If he did not wait until dawn, Noah had no chance of winning. Thinking of this, Noah suddenly had a flash of inspiration and stopped. No chance of winning? Noah narrowed his eyes. I'm afraid not. Noah thought of a way to deal with the last king. It should be a way to reduce the power of the last king and make him easier to deal with. Unfortunately, Noah did not have that much time to implement that method. Moreover, implementing that method was the same as letting Noah kill people for a purpose. Among the people he killed, there might even be people who had a close relationship with Noah, or even people who did not know him. That kind of thing, I can't do it. Noah laughed at himself and continued to walk in the direction of the hotel. When Noah returned to the hotel, Alice suddenly rushed out. Without saying a word, she directly dragged the stunned Noah into the room. It wasn't until Noah arrived at Alice's room that he realized something was wrong. There was already a guest here. Seeing you safe and sound, I don't know whether to be happy or sad. With such a sentence, the God Slayer, known as the Black Prince, sat on a seat, looked at Noah, and said very straightforwardly, "Anyway, I apologize to you first. I didn't keep an eye on Lancelot. When I realized that he was gone, the woman over there triggered the spirit vision and saw the whole thing." Noah raised his eyebrows, turned his head, and looked at Alice. "So, you know what happened?" "I'm afraid I know more than you." Alice nodded seriously, which was rare. "You don't know that Lord Guinevere is dead, right?" "Guinevere is dead?" Noah suddenly froze. The god ancestor, who secretly plotted against him, was dead? Thinking of this, Noah realized. As for why the hero suddenly woke up, he did not know the reason. Chapter 1483. I see. Sitting across from Yarek, Noah shook his head with a bitter smile after listening to Alice's narration of the entire process of the hero's resurrection. In other words, Guinevere was able to find the hero, the last king, thanks to me and Athena, right? You could say that. Alice also smiled bitterly. It's not strange that the essence of Gaia could stimulate the god of steel. Lord Guinevere only expanded this foundation by a few times, even at the cost of his own life. Removing the seal of the draconic serpent, increasing the essence of Gaia, stimulating the divine aura of the last king, and using the spiritual eye to spy on the location of the last king. It's quite a simple method, Yarek said slowly. It's very similar to the method that short-sighted woman would use. But I have to say, Guinevere's self-sacrifice did indeed restore the last king to his prime. Even after his death, he still brings us a lot of trouble. What an annoying guy. When the hero who annihilated the demon king woke up, his state would be very incomplete, and all his power would be lost. Only by absorbing enough essence of Gaia could the hero recover to his full state and carry out the mission of annihilating the demon king. If he couldn't recover to a certain state, the hero wouldn't even be able to carry out the ancient covenant of annihilating the demon king. Compared to the other disobedient gods, the hero was much less of a threat. The problem was that the hero not only had an extremely strong immortality, but also had a large number of followers around him. Lancelot has already recovered to his disobedient state, and the god of wind, whose true face is unknown, but who seems to be able to control the wind. Yarek said in a calm tone. The enemy is not just an unmatched hero, there are also two disobedient gods with outstanding power. This situation can no longer be described as troublesome. Despite saying so, Yarek didn't show any signs of pressure at all, as if he wasn't worried at all that the hero who annihilated the demon king would find him. This calmness caused Alice to speak in a provocative manner. Since the enemy is unprecedentedly powerful, why are you still so calm? Do you have a way to deal with such a powerful faction? Let's not talk about whether the enemy camp can be dealt with. Yarek glanced at Alice and said without changing his expression. If it's just to deal with the last king, I do have a simple idea. This sentence made Alice stunned all of a sudden. Ignoring Alice, Yarek stared at the silent Noah with a meaningful look. I think you should have thought of that simple method, right? Noah met Yarek's gaze and curled his lips noncommittally. That was indeed a simple method. Moreover, Noah did think of that method on the way back to the hotel. At this moment, Yarek bluntly explained the method that was said to be simple, but was definitely enough to shock the entire world. Since the number of god-slayers in the world today is greater, the power of the hero who annihilates the demon king will be stronger. Then, as long as the number of god-slayers is reduced to only one person, the last king can't even activate the ancient covenant. Isn't that enough? The shocking idea finally came out of Yarek's mouth and made Alice's pretty face freeze. But it had to be said that Yarek's method was the best way to guarantee victory over the last king. Why was the hero so much more powerful than the other gods of disobedience, even reaching a 3-digit level? Without a doubt, it was all because of the ancient covenant. Noah believed that the hero's power and threat were on par with Az-Dakaha, who was known as the final human trial. But that was for Noah personally. In fact, if he really wanted to calculate, the threat of the 3-headed demonic dragon was undoubtedly much more terrifying than the hero who annihilated the demon king. After all, Az-Dakaha was a terrifying existence that could threaten the entire Hekada and even the entire world. The demonic dragon that had once defeated millions of gods made the 3-digit number of Hekada's existences fearful. And the reason why Az-Dakaha could become a terrifying existence that the entire Hekada could not resist was because of one reason. Simulated star map, another cosmology. It was called Avestas, another cosmology of simulated creation of the stars. That was the real reason why Az-Dakaha was feared by millions of gods. That, another cosmology, could imitate the target's cosmology by defining oneself as the rightmost side of good and evil, using it as a mirror to host oneself, counteracting the power used by the target. It could also imitate the target's own characteristics without any changes until the target left the battle or was defeated. There were only 2 cosmologies that could not be imitated by this another cosmology. One was the Zoroastrianism cosmology that was of the same origin as Az-Dakaha. The other was the human cosmology that was the target of Az-Dakaha's trial. Apart from these 2 cosmologies, if an opponent with other cosmologies came, Az-Dakaha would be able to obtain all the power of that person. If 10 came, he would be able to obtain the power of those 10 people. Even if there were hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of people, he would be able to obtain all the power of his opponents. Therefore, even if millions of gods were his opponents, Az-Dakaha could defeat all the gods with absolute power, bringing the most extreme terror to the entire Hekada. Not to mention, Az-Dakaha could also use another cosmology to offset the abilities of his opponents. That was the true unsolvable. However, apart from another cosmology, there were many people in the Hekada who could surpass Az-Dakaha in terms of power. Not to mention anything else, just in terms of power, White Yaksha was definitely stronger than Az-Dakaha. Not only White Yaksha, but even Gagir would be above Az-Dakaha if he obtained the sovereignty of a few sons and completed a part of the spiritual core. Otherwise, Az-Dakaha's head and shoulders wouldn't have been pierced through, leaving only his heart, which exposed many of his weaknesses. As for the hero, his power should only be in the 4 digits. However, the ancient covenant gave the hero an increase in strength equivalent to 7 gods layers, allowing the hero's strength to rise to the 3-digit level. In other words, the 3-headed dragon and the hero, one could not use a cheat, while the other could use a cheat without restraint. As a result, the 2 were on the same level. There was no need to say who was the greater threat. However, the 3-headed dragon's, another cosmology, had no effect on Noah, while the hero's ancient covenant could be used without restraint. Therefore, to Noah, the 3-headed dragon and the hero were on the same level of power and threat. In other words, as long as he could make the hero unable to use a cheat like the demonic dragon, this person would not be a threat to Noah. Your power is particularly outstanding even among us. I believe that no one will have any objections. Yarek spoke as if he was trying to induce Noah, but also as if he was talking to himself. For you, the hero who can activate the covenant is the real enemy, but the rest of your kind are not necessarily the same. If you want, you have the ability to implement this plan. After saying that, Yarek finally looked directly at Noah. In that case, why don't you give it a try? Hearing this, Noah looked at Yarek. His dark, deep eyes were filled with coldness. Yarek also looked at Noah, his eyes containing some sharpness. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became tense. Chapter 1484. An indescribable tension pervaded the entire space. Noah and Yarek both looked straight at each other. Their intertwined gazes seemed to be able to create sparks, making the surrounding atmosphere more and more tense. At this time, Alice, who was watching this scene unfold, chose to remain silent. There was no other reason. As Yarek's political enemy, Alice could easily guess the Black Prince's motive for saying this. Alice believed that Noah could also understand why Yarek said this. As expected, Noah curled his lips and said sarcastically, "If you want to test me, can you please use a more sophisticated method?" In response to Noah's words, Yarek remained calm and collected as he said this. "I don't think I can come up with a probing method that you can't detect in a short time." "Then you might as well ask me directly." Noah shrugged. "Ask me if I have any thoughts of attacking you." "Actually, I'm doing the same, right?" Yarek said leisurely. "Since I'm using such an unsophisticated probing method, it's the same as asking you directly. There's not much difference." "Is that so?" Noah glanced at Yarek. "You're really not an ordinary troublemaker. Please call it a polite negotiation method," Yarek retorted. "After all, it's too rude to ask directly, isn't it?" "That really surprises me," Alice couldn't help but interject. "Alexander, I just want to know, when did you talk about manners?" "Because I'm different from a pretentious princess like you," Yarek retorted, not to be outdone. "I know very well what kind of person I should be polite to and what kind of person I should be direct with. Unlike you, woman, who pretends to be polite but is actually careless." Yarek's words made Alice open her mouth again. She was about to continue retorting but was stopped by Noah, who was annoyed beyond words. "It doesn't matter whether I'm polite or careless, right?" Noah said impatiently. "It's fine as long as it's cute, right?" The entire place fell silent. Yarek looked at Noah strangely. Alice, on the other hand, blushed. She lowered her head and started to fidget. Only then did Noah realize that he had said something so immoral. He immediately coughed and changed the topic. "No matter what, I will go and meet that hero after daybreak and decide the victor between us." In other words, Noah would not kill the rest of the Godslayers just to weaken the power of the last king. "Is that so?" Yarek nodded indifferently, but in his heart, he let out a sigh of relief. Yarek's words were from the bottom of his heart. In terms of combat prowess, Noah was superior to the other Godslayers. Even Warban and Luo Hao, who were known as the oldest Godslayers, had been defeated by Noah in one fell swoop when they fought together. Yarek had also fought with Noah before. In the battle between Noah and Athena, he had seen the attack that could split heaven and earth. He was really afraid of Noah. Therefore, Yarek wanted to probe a little to see if Noah was likely to attack the rest of the Godslayers in order to defeat the last king. If Noah had such intentions, then compared to the last king, Yarek felt that he needed to be more vigilant against this unusual fellow. Now, Noah said that he did not intend to use such a convenient method, which did indeed make Yarek feel a little relieved. Then, Yarek pondered for a while and looked directly at Noah. "How are you going to deal with the hero who annihilated the Demon King?" "What?" Noah looked at Yarek with a half-smile. "Do you want to help?" "Help?" Yarek did not answer but asked instead. "Do you need my help?" Hearing this, Noah also did not answer but asked instead. "Can you deal with Lancelot and the masked wind god at the same time?" "At the same time?" Yarek pondered for a while and then gave such an answer. "If it's just dealing with them, it shouldn't be a problem to use some small tricks." "Small tricks?" Noah suddenly laughed. "Okay, then I'll leave Lancelot and the masked wind god to you. In other words, you will still be responsible for dealing with the last king, right?" Yarek asked directly. "Do you have a chance of winning? Open your eyes wide and see for yourself whether you have a chance of winning or not." Noah turned his gaze to Alice. "Can I trouble you to help me find the whereabouts of Erica and the others?" When the last king descended and sunk the entire invisible island with the blade of salvation that could even cut a star, Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Kira should have been on the island as well. Logically speaking, under the attack of the blade of salvation, even Noah and Athena chose to avoid it. In the face of such an attack, the four girls definitely had no chance of surviving. Fortunately, before the battle with Athena, Noah gave Avalon to the girls. With the protection of the scabbard, the girls should be able to escape the disaster. Noah returned to the hotel at a leisurely pace because he thought that the girls were likely to have returned here first. Now, it seemed that the girls had not returned yet. In response, Alice said, Erica has already returned. In fact, Erica and the others have already returned. After learning that the last king has woken up, they went out again, preparing to investigate the hero's current actions. Is that so? Noah frowned slightly. They even went to the Wanli Valley? Yes. Alice nodded. Miss Yoli's spirit vision is quite remarkable. That's why Erica suggested that we bring Miss Yoli along to see if she can see some of the true colors of the last king. Maybe Miss Yuan can notice the weaknesses that nobody else has. Is that so? Noah relaxed his frown. Then Erica and the others should be near the last king now, right? Yes. Alice asked curiously. What's wrong? No, I just happened to think of something. Noah suddenly smiled. Alice, please contact Erica and ask her to do something for me. What's the matter? Alice and Yarek both looked at Noah. Under the gaze of Alice and Yarek, Noah said, Help me send something to the last king. Both Alice and Yarek were stunned by his words. On the other side, on the outskirts of a city, the hero, Lancelot, and the masked wind god slowly walked over and stepped onto the lush green lawn. As soon as he stepped onto the lawn, the hero let out a sorrowful sigh. This was because with the arrival of the hero, the greenery on the lawn withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a moment, the life of the flowers and grass was taken away, turning into a withered land of death. Seeing this, the hero looked even more tired. We have to hurry. The brave warrior had seen the same thing happen many times. The existence of the kings in the apocalypse itself was an opportunity that led to the apocalypse. In order to prevent the world from being destroyed, the hero only had one thing to do. That was to find the current generation of God-slayers and have a duel to the death with them. There was no other way. Looking at the city in front of him, the hero lifted his foot and stepped into it. However, at this moment, a faint light suddenly appeared in the air and landed in front of the hero and the others. The hero was startled. Oh! Lancelot and the masked wind god were also surprised. This was because the figures of a few girls had appeared in the faint light. They were humans. You are the one known as the last king, right? The girl named Erica Brantley took a step forward, looked at the hero, and spoke with an elegant smile without any hesitation. Hero who annihilated the demon king, my lord has something to give you. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.